Chapter 179. Jiang Xing had guessed many things, but he had not expected Jin to be Jiang Ruan's friend. He was startled and said, "What? You don't remember me?" Jin looked at Jiang Xing's confused expression and was somewhat anxious. She looked around to make sure no one was around before she leaned in and said, "At the palace banquet, you saved my life. I am here to repay the debt of gratitude. Don't you remember?" Jiang Xing frowned. At first, he felt that this girl looked somewhat familiar, but he did not know why. Now that she reminded him, he suddenly remembered. At the palace banquet of Empress Dowager Ida, assassins had come out to assassinate her, and he seemed to have saved two girls in passing. Now that he thought about it, the face of the girl in front of him overlapped. "But," he said in surprise, "you are an official's daughter, why are you here?" At that time, he did not pay attention and naturally did not know this girl's identity. It was possible that she was attending the palace banquet, so she must be an official's daughter. How could such a delicate young lady enter the enemy camp? It would be a problem to travel from the capital to the border thousands of miles away. What about her parents? Our Fu has always had rules. The life-saving grace must be repaid with gushes of spring. Jin said seriously, "Since you saved my life, I should repay you no matter what. You are trapped in the enemy camp. If something happens to you, I won't even have the chance to repay you. This is a violation of the Fu's precepts, so I took the liberty of mixing in with the female members of the reinforcement army camp to come here. If my parents knew, they would definitely support me in doing so." This was completely sophistry. For a girl to come out so boldly, and an official's family was even more concerned about reputation, her parents must have been angered half to death. Yet, she could still speak so eloquently. Jiang Xing had a headache and said, "You should not have come here, it is too dangerous." "Since I am here, I am not afraid of danger." Jin spoke very quickly, which was very much in line with her straightforward character. "If you drive me away now, it will be really dangerous." "Then how did you enter the enemy camp?" Although he could roughly remember what Jin had said and she was Jiang Ruan's friend, Jiang Xing could no longer treat her coldly. However, he still had doubts in his heart. Jin heard this and smiled. "Deputy General Jiang, Xiao Wangye's genie guards have arrived, how can they just stand by and watch? In any case, you are Xiao Wangye's brother-in-law. If Xiao Wangye ignores you, will Wan Mimi let him go? Xiao Wangye has sent people to save you, but..." Jin stuck out her tongue, "The martial arts of his subordinates are too high. The people of the southern border are treacherous and they are afraid of arousing suspicion. Ordinary women are not willing to go. The bold ones are not smart, and the smart ones are afraid of death. Only I am bold and smart, so I volunteered. So, Prince Xiao sent me. Only I am brave and smart, I volunteered, so Xiao Wangye sent me." She finished speaking in one breath and even took the opportunity to praise herself a few times, making her seem even more frank and lively. Perhaps it was because she was different from the noble young ladies commonly seen in the capital, she even dared to tease him about Xiao Xiao. Jiang Xing was slightly surprised. He didn't know which family she came from to have such a pleasant temperament. He asked, "Which family's young miss are you? What is your father's name?" Jin was startled and smiled, "My father is just a small military officer. I don't think Deputy General Jiang knows him. As for young miss, you can call me Jin. I am now your maidservant, not a young miss." Jiang Xing paused and said in a low voice, "I saved you, not because I want you to repay me. You are a young lady. It is too risky to do such a thing. In the future, you must be careful. The people of Nanjiang are too cunning. I will use my own methods to protect you. You also need to be careful. If necessary, you don't need to worry about me." This was a warning. Jiang Xing's words showed that he believed Jin and would protect her in the future. The young man's expression was resolute. His facial features were refined, but he also had the sharpness of someone who practiced martial arts. His actions and words were open and aboveboard, and his serious appearance had a different kind of charm. Jean slightly blushed and took a step back. Yes. While the two of them were talking, the outside had unknowingly quietened down. It was deep into the night, the southern border soldiers had all drunk the strong wine and were sleeping soundly on the ground. It was quiet outside, the entire camp had sunk into an extreme silence, as if it was very peaceful. Jiang Xing frowned. People who practice martial arts will have a great feeling when they see a little change. Especially at this moment, although nothing happened, his heart faintly felt that something was wrong. This military camp was too quiet. It was so quiet that he felt like something was going to happen next. However, he didn't open the tent and look outside. The two soldiers were still there. Jean noticed his expression and seemed to feel a little uneasy. She moved closer to Jiang Xing's ear and whispered, "Why is it so quiet? It's almost like..." Her voice was too soft, so Jiang Xing couldn't hear her clearly. He turned his head, wanting to hear what she was saying. Who knew that as soon as he turned his head, Jean's lips brushed past his cheek. Jiang Xing's body stiffened, and Jean's face instantly turned red. Jiang Xing had never had such intimate contact with a woman in his life. Perhaps it was because he had personally witnessed the cruel scheming of his wives and concubines in the Jiangfu, but other than his only sister, Jiang Xing always kept a respectful distance from women. He was a deputy general in the military camp and had a bright future ahead of him. Later on, he was known as the god of war. Not to mention those who wanted to use their daughters to build connections, there were also many women who came forward to express their love for him. He was young, handsome, tall and extraordinary. He also acted like a gentleman and naturally attracted people's attention. Now that he was so rude, Jiang Xing was a little annoyed, but he did not know how to apologize to Jean. After a brief moment of panic, Jean calmed down. Under the dim light, her expression could not be seen clearly. She turned her head and nonchalantly said, "I think it's a little strange. Could it be that Xiao Wangye has sent people to rescue us?" Jiang Xing was stunned. He heard Jean say, "How much of your martial arts have you recovered?" 70%. Jiang Xing thought for a moment before answering. "Can you beat the two people outside?" Jean asked. "I can." "That's good." Jean became a little nervous. "You have to be prepared." I think I heard a signal outside." "Signal?" Jiang Xing felt strange. "I asked before I came here." "Wolves howl as a signal." Listen, in the quiet night, there were indeed a few wolf howls. There were many hungry wolves on the grasslands, but they always kept a respectful distance from the soldiers with torches and guns. Now that there were a few wolf howls in the distance, it didn't seem to be a big deal. But Jean was so sure that there must be a special rhythm. The two people in the tent held their breath. The night outside was dark and there seemed to be a rustling sound in the dark. The soldiers turned over and continued to sleep, so they ignored the slight sound. Until the rustling sound became a crackling sound, mixed with the sound of something collapsing, a piece of hardwood falling, waking a sleeping soldier with a thud. He rubbed his eyes, stood up, and walked out of the tent. He wanted to see what was making such a big noise. As soon as he got out of the tent, he felt a wave of heat hitting his face. The smell of alcohol suddenly woke him up. He immediately opened his eyes wide and saw a tongue of fire spreading wantonly in the distance, almost lighting up the entire sky. The dark night was as bright as day, and the light of the fire was reflected in his eyes. The fire grew bigger and bigger, almost engulfing his thoughts. Only when the fire had already spread to the nearest tent did he suddenly wake up. He let out a miserable scream with difficulty from his throat, and then shouted with a changed tone, "Get up quickly! Get up! The granary is on fire!" Like a clap of thunder in the dark night, it almost woke up everyone in the tent. The soldiers rushed out of the tent and were immediately stunned by the scene in front of them. They couldn't care about anything else and said, "Quickly put out the fire, quickly put out the fire, but in this wasteland, water was precious. Food and water were scarce. Such a big fire couldn't help. But the place that was on fire was the granary. That was the rations and provisions for the soldiers of the southern border. The fire was burning more and more fiercely. The soldiers were distressed, but then they felt a deep fear. Before the troops and horses moved, the rations and fodder came first. Originally, they had been laughing at the great Jin dynasty's rations and provisions being burned away in the capital. Now it was their turn. The soldiers of the great Jin dynasty had lost their rations and could only rely on what they had before. But now that their rations had been completely burned, they couldn't even last for a day. What's more, they didn't have enough water. They had to watch helplessly as the rations they relied on for survival turned into a pile of ashes. How cruel! What are you panicking for? Use the sand to put out the fire. A low shout suddenly came from the darkness. Everyone looked over and saw that the man in gray had stood up. His voice was deep, obviously full of anger. Be careful not to disturb the holy maiden. Advisor. The rations and provisions have been burned. A soldier couldn't help but panic. What should we do? Shut up, Yuan Chuan said. All soldiers, go to the sand dune in front and scoop up the sand. If anyone dares to disturb, they will be dealt with according to military law. The soldiers immediately fell silent. Yuan Chuan was their leader. With Yuan Chuan around, there seemed to be nothing to worry about. At Yuan Chuan's command, everyone rushed to the nearest sand dune. Yuan Chuan stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His loose robe covered most of his face, making it impossible to see his expression. However, his beautiful red lips didn't curl up like before. It was obvious that he wasn't in a good mood. Although he spoke with certainty, looking at the state of the fire, it was clear that the rations and fodder could no longer be salvaged. He was powerless to do anything. The fingers hidden under his robe slowly curled into a fist. Yuan Chuan stood rooted to the ground, as if he had forgotten something. This fire must have been set by the soldiers of the great Jin dynasty. This was a sinister move. They had underestimated the embroidered uniform guards. They hadn't made any moves these days. Were they waiting for an opportunity? They had chosen this time, when the soldiers of the southern border were most relaxed. They had really put in a lot of effort. But what had they forgotten? Yuan Chuan looked over, his gaze pausing when it passed by a certain large tent. Outside the tent, two soldiers were still standing ramrod straight, but their postures were somewhat stiff. Yuan Chuan turned his head. The two soldiers didn't move an inch, like two statues of stone. Yuan Chuan's heart skipped a beat. He shouted, quickly, go see where Jiang Xing is. The soldiers were also startled. They hurriedly ran to the large tent where Jiang Xing was being held, only to find that the two guards at the door had been dead for a long time. They were only being supported by a long pole to maintain a standing posture. The large tent had long been empty. There was no one inside. Not good, Jiang Xing has escaped. A panicked voice floated over the entire southern border barracks. Yuan Chuan stood in the distance, pursing his lips tightly. In a fierce voice, he said, in such a short time, he can't have escaped far. Chase him. The subordinate received the order and left. Yuan Chuan looked at the raging fire in the granary in the distance, then looked at the empty tent. There was no one in the tent. Even the servant girl had disappeared. Jiang Xing was a man who had tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. Something was wrong. He seemed to have thought of something. His body suddenly stiffened. Jiang Xing's daily meals were laced with muscle-softening powder. How did he defeat the guards at the door? In today's fire, he took advantage of the chaos to escape. How did he grasp the situation so accurately and coordinate so seamlessly? That servant girl. Jiang Xing was not a person who easily trusted others. Especially in this southern border barracks, he was on guard against everyone. The spy they had sent to Jiang Xing's side had not been able to obtain any useful information from Jiang Xing's mouth. Now, on his escape, Jiang Xing had even brought along a servant girl. That servant girl was certainly not that simple. Perhaps she had been sent by Xiao Xiao to receive Jiang Xing. Yuan Chuan's face was as calm as still water. He had long been furious in his heart. All his life, he had thought that he was extremely intelligent and everything was within his grasp. He did not expect that he would be tricked like this. Firstly, that servant girl did not seem to have any high level of martial arts. Secondly, he had expected that this servant girl would not have such courage. Yet, she had managed to fool him. Today, Xiao Xiao had sent people to burn down his granary and let Jiang Xing escape. How could this not be a great humiliation to him? The anger in his heart at the humiliation was greater than anything else. At night, the wind in the wilderness was extremely strong. The sound of the horses' hooves could be heard. The whistling wind blew the long hair of the people riding the horse high up. Jin sat on the horse and Jiang Xing was behind her. His hands were around her and holding the reins. It looked like he was holding her whole body in his arms. Because they were too close, Jin's face turned slightly red. In order not to let the man behind her notice her embarrassment, she said, "What if they catch up?" Jiang Xing faintly smiled, thinking that she was afraid. He comforted her by saying, "Don't be afraid. Once we cross Liaoshui River, we will be fine." Since Xiao Xiao sent people to receive us, naturally, he has made full preparations. Jin thought for a moment, then suddenly laughed. Xiao Wangye's move is really ruthless. When he saved you, he also set fire to the granary. This is called giving him a taste of his own medicine. If I was a person from the southern wilderness, I am afraid that I will die of anger at this moment. Xiao Tianyeo's face changed. Jiang Xing didn't understand what she meant by giving people a taste of their own medicine. He was under house arrest in the tent, so he was not well informed. At this moment, when he heard Jin's words, he guessed some things. Thinking of Jin's performance, he smiled and said, "Your martial arts is good, and your courage is also very big." In fact, Jin's martial arts was still far from being good. He could only see that she had practiced martial arts before. But, he thought that it was because the people in the Xiao family were distressed that a good girl practiced martial arts. Jin's martial arts were relatively shallow and could only be used for self-defense. If he were to say that he admired her, it was because of her ruthlessness. In the face of those guards who woke up and blocked the road, she showed no fear. She was not soft-hearted at all. She was like a martial artist from a military family. When Jin heard this, she looked back and said with a smile, "That is natural," as she seemed to realize something, so her words stopped abruptly. She looked at Jiang Xing with some uneasiness, but she found out that Jiang Xing was looking at her. Jiang Xing stretched out his hand to touch her face. She was so nervous that she did not move. She watched as Jiang Xing peeled off a piece of skin from her face. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Fake?" That burn scar was currently in Jiang Xing's hand. Jin let out a sigh of relief. When she heard this, she smiled and said, "Of course it is fake. If I don't disguise myself, it would not be good. Earlier, you did not recognize me. Now, look at me. Do you still recognize me?" Her smile was very open and frank. She deliberately moved closer to Jiang Xing so that he could take a closer look. She was still holding a small torch in her hand. Under the illumination of the fire, her skin was clean and white, and the layer of scars had faded away. She could really be considered a beautiful girl. Her facial features were delicate, and there was a kind of heroic spirit about her. Her every move was very frank. Jiang Xing's heart was slightly moved. He turned his head away and said, "Back then, you were just a little girl. Now, she was a young and inexperienced girl." He felt an indescribable joy in his heart. Previously, when he saw the scar on Jean Er's face, he thought that Jean had encountered some unforeseen event in the past few years. He did not want to poke at her sore spot. Now that he discovered that it was only a fake scar, he let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, he secretly felt that his worries were funny. When did he start paying attention to these trivial matters? In the time that they were moving, the two of them had already arrived at the Liao River. There was a small bridge made of bamboo on top of it. The water below was surging with huge waves. It seemed that if they were not careful, they would be swallowed by the waves. Jiang Xing and Jean dismounted from their horses and drove the horses away. The two of them stepped onto the bridge. When they crossed the other side, they saw that there was indeed someone waiting on the other side. When that person saw that Jiang Xing and Jean had safely arrived, he did not say anything further. He ordered his companions to draw their knives and cut the cables on this side of the bridge. The bridge was cut with a loud bang. Even if the Nanjiang people wanted to cross the river, they would not be able to do so for the time being. The few of them jumped onto the large horses that had been prepared earlier and disappeared into the night. In the Great Jin's barracks, the young man sitting on the commander's seat was dressed in a dark green military uniform. His eyes were as cold as jade. A subordinate imperial bodyguard entered the tent and reported, "Master, Deputy General Jiang and Miss Xiao are already safe. They will arrive shortly. The Nanjiang people's granary has also been burned by us. There shouldn't be any more mishaps for the time being." Xiao Xiao faintly grunted and lowered his eyes without saying anything. Guanliang Han, who was sitting to the side, could not help but say, "Lao San, your subordinates are truly extraordinary. They were able to burn down the enemy's barracks without making a sound. If it were my subordinates, I'm afraid that they would not be able to do it so beautifully. Under the heavens, only you, the brocade guard, can do something like this. This is too fucking satisfying." He ran outside in a white robe draped over his shoulders. Inside, white bandages could faintly be seen. Currently, the wounds on his body had not completely healed. However, he could no longer restrain himself and was determined to see how this battle would be fought. At that time, Guanliang Han and Jiang Xing had been injured because they had been ambushed by the Nanjiang spies. Guanliang Han hated the Nanjiang people to the point of gnashing his teeth. The Nanjiang people's stomachs are full of evil water. We are fighting with those grandsons of Tianjin, but the Nanjiang people also want to interfere. Isn't this an upright method? What kind of ability is this to play dirty tricks? All is fair in war. Xiao Xiao said lightly, but his brows were slightly knitted. He naturally understood why the Nanjiang people would interfere. However, there were some things that could not be revealed to outsiders. Guanliang Han also did not know the deeper meaning behind it. The ambition of the Nanjiang people was evident. Now was the time to lure the snake out of its hole. He spared no effort in suppressing the Nanjiang people. In fact, it was not as far-reaching as Guanliang Han had thought. Xiao Xiao thought of the letter sent by pigeon from the capital. It was written that Xia Jun and Jiang Chao had joined forces to burn the provisions that were being transported to the frontier, but in the end, they had been blocked by Jiang Ruan, who had returned a tooth for a tooth. Xian Li had suffered a double loss, and Xia Jun and Jiang Chao had also suffered the consequences of their own actions. Qi Feng's letter had unintentionally revealed his admiration for Jiang Ruan. Xiao Xiao also felt honored. However, since Xian Li had also colluded with the Nanjiang, and they had plotted against the brocade guard in the capital, Jiang Ruan had blocked them for him. However, Jinying Wangfu had never suffered a loss and swallowed it into their stomach. Naturally, he would spare no effort to get back at them. Therefore, without thinking, he had people burn down the Nanjiang people's granary. The Nanjiang people and Tianjin people must have reached some kind of agreement. Since this fire had burned the provisions of the Nanjiang barracks, the Nanjiang people would naturally seek help from Tianjin. However, Tianjin was currently unable to fend for itself. Moreover, it was a small place that did not have abundant resources. How could they come up with such a large amount of provisions? If they could not come up with provisions, the Nanjiang people would not continue to be stationed here. There was no such thing as throwing away one's life for nothing. If the alliance between the Nanjiang and Tianjin broke, they would split up and attack one by one. As for Zhao Jin, he had not yet found a suitable candidate. Since Zhao Jin had volunteered, it seemed that she was very suitable, so he had tacitly agreed. Now that Jiang Xing had been safely rescued, there were some things that he did not have to worry about. He could really go all out with peace of mind. Guan Lianghan said, "Now that old Jiang has returned and the Nanjiang's strength has been greatly damaged, we only need to concentrate on Tianjin." "Damn it, your father, have long been unhappy with those Tianjin grandsons. Lao San, I am much more at ease now that you are here. This time, if we do not teach Tianjin a lesson, we are not worthy of being called brothers from Jianan Mountain." These words were meant to provoke him, but Guan Lianghan himself knew that it was actually not necessary. This was because Xiao Xiao's temperament was really very direct. He was so direct that his battle tactics did not require too much finesse. With such an invincible army, coupled with his master's cold and decisive orders, the depression that had accumulated because of Jiang Xing's imprisonment, now that there was a breakthrough, he would definitely mercilessly vent it all out. This battlefield would soon become a Shiraba. Chapter 180. On the snow-white woolen carpet, the woman's gorgeous dress swayed, drawing a gorgeous red line. The crimson veil covered her face, revealing only a pair of bright eyes. It was a pair of beautiful eyes, incomparably clear at a glance, with a kind of naive bewitchment. It was as if one would be intoxicated by those eyes if they looked at them. The gray-clothed man stood below the woman, his voice containing a trace of imperceptible nervousness. "Holy Maiden, Jiang Xing has escaped. There are people on Liao Shuihe's side who can't catch up." Silence. After a long time, a languid woman's voice sounded in the air. "Is that so? You can't even do such a small thing well. Yuan Chuan, the more you live, the more you turn back. Holy Maiden is right." Yuan Chuan lowered his head and said, "Although Jiang Xing has escaped, it is not that we have gained nothing this time. There is news from the capital that Xianli has failed in the matter of the provisions. Their spies have yet to find out, but our people have already discovered the signs. The person who did it is hiding in Jinying Wangfu." The words Jinying Wangfu clearly moved the woman on the seat. She tilted her head, her voice containing a slight smile. "Oh? Who is that person?" Before Jinying Wang left, he brought his two martial brothers, Qi Si and Xia Wu, back to the capital. Now, both of them live near Jinying Wangfu. But Jinying Wang's purpose in bringing them over is to protect Jinying Wangfei, the eldest daughter of the Jiang family, Jiang Xing's younger sister, and the current Hong and Junju. This time, the matter of the provisions was handled in a different manner from Qi Si's. If the information that my subordinates have sent back is correct, it is most likely from Jinying Wangfei's hands. The woman on the seat did not speak, but there seemed to be a tense atmosphere spreading in the air. The surrounding maids all lowered their heads. After an unknown amount of time, the slowly rising incense almost burned out. Yuan Chuan maintained his respectful posture of bowing his head and did not move. Only then did he hear a cold laugh slowly coming from above. "Jinying Wangfei? What is that thing?" Yuan Chuan carefully glanced at the woman in front of her. Her bright eyes instantly became deep and serene, and a familiar emotion flashed across them. The woman slowly stood up. She was not tall and could be said to be petite. She wore a bright red dress that outlined her graceful figure, and every move she made was charming. This kind of charm was not the charm of a woman from a brothel. Instead, it was a kind of naive attitude. It was as if she was born like this, like a beautiful cub that was born to be seduced. "He has burned our provisions, the southern border soldiers cannot participate in this battle," she said word by word, her voice still as lazy as before, but her words were incomparably calm. "Exactly. The Tianjin nation has sent back news that they can't provide us with too much money. They hope that we can think of a way ourselves." Yuan Chuan said, "What do you mean, Saint?" The soldiers' provisions had been burned, and the soldiers could no longer stay here. The kingdom of Tianjin could barely take care of itself now, and they lacked trust in the southern border. Naturally, they were unwilling to provide extra provisions. How could a little bit of provisions solve the urgent situation? If the southern border still wanted to help Tianjin deal with the Jin dynasty, it would be an arduous and thankless task. Treacherous people don't deserve to be my allies, the woman said coldly. The Tianjin nation is about to lose. They themselves know this, that's why they are like this. Yuan Chuan, go back and give the order, the alliance is over, let the soldiers quickly return to the southern border. Yuan Chuan stared blankly for a moment, then probingly asked, Holy Maiden, if we return to the southern border just like this, the great Jin dynasty sighed. Holy Maiden is prepared to give up. Yuan Chuan knew better than anyone else why they had to form an alliance with the Tianjin nation. Now that he heard the saintess' decision, he felt incredulous. Yuan Chuan, when have I ever given up? The woman sighed, but the expression in her eyes became somewhat strange. The root cause of our suffering this time is that something went wrong in the Jin dynasty's capital. The Jiang family's daughter that you mentioned really displeases me. You've captured the war god of the great Jin dynasty for so long and interrogated him every day. What have you found out? Yuan Chuan lowered his head guiltily. Your subordinate is incompetent. I was unable to get the truth out of Jiang Xing. Wrong. The saintess shook her head and said, he said it a long time ago, it's just that you didn't notice. Yuan Chuan is dull, please enlighten me, saintess. He looked at the woman in confusion, but heard the woman's languid and gentle voice say, you interrogate him every day, but he refuses to say anything, not even the slightest clue. As far as I know, when Jiang Xing was in the army and fought, he was not such a cautious person. For him to be so cautious, the person he was protecting must be someone extremely important. I heard that Jiang Xing and this daughter of the Jiang family have an extremely good relationship. When Jiang Xing first returned to the capital of the great Jin dynasty, it was also this Jiang Ruan who rescued him from an ambush. Ever since these two siblings met, Jiang Xing's official career has been steadily promoted, and everything has been smooth sailing. Do you think this is a coincidence? Yuan Chuan was startled. In a flash, he had already understood many things. He looked at the woman and said, Saintess suspects. But she is only an ordinary woman, how could she know so much about the future? There were many capable people in the world, but a woman who stayed in her boudoir, no matter how one looked at it, was too unbelievable. As a citizen of the southern border, you are also from a family of witchcraft music. What is impossible? The voice under the veil of the saintess was pleasant to listen to, but if one listened carefully, there was a faint murderous intent in it. You ignored all this because you did not take her seriously. You thought that she was no match for you. And I, from the beginning, had never thought of sparing her life. Yuan Chuan lowered his head. Saintess is wise. He actually invited his fellow disciples back to the capital to protect her. I originally thought that with her intelligence, she could be of use to me, but now it seems that she is disgusting. The daughter of the Jiang family was able to silently destroy the secret agents we planted in the capital, and even that good-for-nothing Xianli was defeated by her. This is an eye-opener for me. I heard that Xiao Xiao defeated Tianjin, and after returning to the capital, he will marry her. She suddenly laughed lightly. Just hearing it sounds ridiculous. She did not say anything harsh, and her tone was as languid and gentle as before, even with a hint of sweet charm. But when Yuan Chuan heard this, he shuddered. He had been by the saintess' side for so many years, and he knew all too well what she wanted to do. The more it was like this, the deeper the hatred in her heart, and the more ruthless she would be. Finally, Yuan Chuan could not help but ask, Saintess, do you want to make a move on her? The woman glanced at him. There are people who are more anxious than us. Think of a way to leak the news to Xianli, and say that the burning of the granary was the idea of the daughter of the Jiang family. Now that I can't leave, the Jin court should start to act on some matters. Yuan Chuan, on the day that the Jin court returns to the capital, mix into the team and follow them to the capital. Saintus. Yuan Chuan was startled and said, "We're starting to act now. The people of the Jin court are becoming more and more useless. The only one I can trust is you." She looked at Yuan Chuan with a smile, and her beautiful eyes were like fine gems, like a young girl looking at her most beloved lover. She said, "Yuan Chuan, besides doing my arrangements, you have another task. Xian Li is really too incompetent. If he can't kill the daughter of the Jiang family, you will kill her for me. I don't want to see her live for too long." She slowly said, enunciating each word, after returning to the capital, "Get married? I also want to see what it looks like to be married to a corpse." Yuan Chuan's heart trembled, and he respectfully complied. He turned and left the tent. Time seemed to pass very quickly. In the end, there was no more bad news from the border. When Deputy General Jiang heard that he had been rescued by Jinying Wang, he was tortured from head to toe, but he still clenched his teeth and did not surrender. Such a tough man naturally made the emperor very happy. The previous rumors fell apart, and the courtiers who had been watching from the sidelines now had other ideas. They estimated whether it was possible for their own daughters to form a marriage alliance with the Jiang family. The Jiang family was strange. They were originally a virtuous aristocratic family, but no one knew what kind of bad luck they had run into these past few years. First, the mistress had made a cuckold of the minister, and then second young Miss Jiang, who was originally known as a fairy, had no self-respect and her reputation was ruined. Later, second young Master Jiang and the Xia family rebelled and burned the granary. The emperor saw that the Jiang family was so useless that Minister Jiang's official career seemed to have come to an end, and the Jiang family was not far from decline. But to speak of decline, the Jiang family had produced Hong and Junju, who was deeply favored by Empress Dowager Ida. The eldest young Master Jiang had a promising future as the god of war of the great Jin dynasty. Even the fourth young miss, who was born of a concubine, had now climbed to the third rank, Jiang Zhaoi. Looking at it this way, Minister Jiang's days were not difficult. Some nosy people found out that Minister Jiang had originally favored Jiang Chao and his sister, who were born of Xia Yan. He had treated Jiang Xing and his sister, who were born of his deceased wife, coldly. Jiang Dan was even more so. Who knew that the wheel of fortune would turn? The two siblings, who were originally the least favored, were now living the best lives. The Jiang family had relied on them to bring glory to the family. It was really regrettable. At this moment, winter had passed and the new year was coming, but the weather was still as cold as before. Snowflakes rustled and fell from the sky. Jiang Ruan stood in front of the courtyard. The snowflakes that fell to the ground quickly melted, and her light red dress was like a ball of fire in the snow, shining brilliantly. Qi Feng stood beside her and suddenly said, "Third brother will be back soon." The war between Tianjin and the Great Jin dynasty was about to be settled at the beginning of this year's spring. Tianjin had already angered the Great Jin dynasty. Now, Tianjin was retreating step by step. The brocade guards led by Xiao Xiao were ruthless and cruel. They had almost fought their way into their city. Tianjin was now at the end of the road, and it was only a matter of time before they surrendered to the Great Jin dynasty. But Tianjin did not even have the strength to resist stubbornly. As soon as the war ended, Xiao Xiao naturally rushed over without stopping. Jiang Ruan gently nodded. Qi Feng said, "When third brother returns, you will be married." As he said this, he actually felt a trace of bitterness in his mouth. He turned his head and saw the young girl in front of him. She was dressed in a light red dress, and it was as if thousands of rays of light were sprinkled on her body. Her eyes were bright and charming like a flower. She looked like a ball of fire, but only when he got closer would he discover that it was just a block of ice. These days, he had accompanied this young girl and watched her devise strategies. He watched her predict the future, but it seemed as if she did not care about anything at all. He occasionally wondered if everything in this world could not enter her eyes. Now that he had mentioned the news that Xiao Xiao was about to return, Jiang Ruan's thoughtful expression fell into his eyes. Qi Feng immediately understood. He concealed the emotions in his eyes and teased, "Third sister-in-law, when that day comes, I think the brothers of Jia Nan Mountain will come back to ask for a cup of wedding wine." Jiang Ruan smiled and said, "Thank you." Her attitude was always so distant but not close enough. Qi Feng looked away and found an excuse to leave. Only Jiang Ruan was left standing in the courtyard. Winter passed and spring came. Many things happened this year. Xiao Xiao, who was originally at the border, sent back news that Zhao Jin had gone to the border. This was really beyond her expectations. Zhao Jin had also rescued Jiang Xing. Zhao Jin came from a military family, and she did things with the forthright style of a man. Jiang Ruan informed Zhao Furen of this matter, and Zhao Furen was relieved. The two brothers of the Zhao family were reasonable and did not make things difficult for her. However, when Lin Zixiang found out about this matter, she went to Jinying Wangfu to reprimand Jiang Ruan. She blamed Jiang Ruan for being in the wrong, saying how could Jiang Xing so casually seduce Zhao Jin. This was really too unreasonable, which made Jiang Ruan feel somewhat helpless. Speaking of Lin Zixiang, nowadays, she frequently ran over to Jinying Wangfu, but it was not to see Jiang Ruan. In the end, she had an ulterior motive. She did not know what had started the enmity between her and Xia Qing, but after the misunderstanding was cleared up, the two of them chatted happily. Xia Qing, on the other hand, seemed to like Lin Zixiang very much. It was just that these two people's minds were too clear. Bai Ji and Yi Feng were now somewhat close, and Bai Ji would also send some snacks to Yi Feng from time to time. In any case, Yi Feng had once been Xiao Xiao's right-hand man. In other places, he would have been a man of outstanding status, but every day, regardless of his status, he would come looking for reasons to talk to Bai Ji. Even a fool could see the meaning behind this. Compared to Bai Ji and Yi Feng's gentleness, Lu Zhu and Jin Er fought and quarreled all day long. As long as the two of them were together, they would quarrel. Anyone with a discerning eye could see the reason behind this. Unfortunately, between the two of them, one always had the appearance of a debauchee, while the other was always carefree. No one knew when they would be able to achieve a positive result. Jiang Quan was now even unwilling to come to Jinying Wangfu. Ever since Jiang Chao had met with an accident, Jiang Quan had used a commanding tone to order Jiang Ruan to think of a way to save Jiang Chao, but Jiang Ruan had ignored him. After Jiang Chao's death, Jiang Quan seemed to have aged 10 years overnight. When he looked at Jiang Ruan again, it was already like a stranger. Jiang Ruan was very clear about his thoughts, and he harbored resentment towards Jiang Ruan. Now that Jiang Quan had taken in a few more concubines, it seemed that he wanted to leave a descendant for the Jiang family. He had never been willing to treat Jiang Xing as his own son. Sometimes, Jiang Ruan also felt that it was strange. In her previous life, Jiang Quan was a man who loved power, and would do anything to climb up. Now that she and Jiang Xing could bring the Jiang Fu to greater heights, Jiang Quan had never thought of pleasing them, and even hated them as he always had. Perhaps some people were born to be wronged, and hatred was innate. No matter what Jiang Ruan and Jiang Xing did, as long as they were Zhao Mei's children, Jiang Quan could not possibly like them. As a father, his side was forever only open to Jiang Su and Jiang Chao. Ever since the rations incident, Xianli had been incomparably quiet, and there had been no other movements. Obviously, the destruction of the Xia family had caused a huge loss to Xianli. Over the past year, he had hidden himself from the public eye, and had been a well-behaved prince in the court. He had not even done anything in private. Most of his original power had been destroyed, and after the Xia family had fallen, it had been very difficult for him to find a replacement for the Xia family. The fifth prince, Xian Hua, had become more and more steady, and even the 13th prince, Xian Pei, had gained the emperor's favor, and even Empress Dowager Ida was very fond of him. The crown prince seemed to have become smarter, and was no longer as preposterous as before. With so many opponents in such a short period of time, Xianli probably did not feel good in his heart. However, this did not mean that Xianli intended to give up. On the contrary, Jiang Ruan understood him very well. Xianli had not made a move yet, because he had not found the right opportunity. This person was most adept at concealing his strength and obscurity. Once there was an opportunity, he would naturally not hesitate to make a move. Jiang Dan had now risen from a beauty to a third-rank Xiao Yi. She was very successful in the palace. From the empress to the palace maids, everyone admired her very much. Even a strict person like Empress Dowager Ida could not find fault with her. She had already secretly colluded with Xianli, and her days were not bad. She was a careful and intelligent person, and concealed her ambition very well. In the palace, she had been promoted step by step, and each step she took was very steady. She was living well, but Jiang Ruan was not anxious. This golden age was just a one-handed hunt, and it all depended on who had more patience. She had endured patiently for a lifetime, so what harm was there in waiting for a few days? Jiang Ruan lowered her eyes and stretched out her hand to catch a falling snowflake. The snowflake quickly melted in her palm. The new year was approaching, and in a trance, it seemed that she had returned to the year of her rebirth. She had been curled up in a dirty room in Zhonglan's family's manor, and she could not even afford to burn charcoal. She had woken up from the blood-soaked past life, and all she could see was the cruel reality. Her enemies were high above, and she was below. Time flew by, and now, she stood in Jinying Wangfu. Her position seemed to have been reversed. Her enemies were either dead or injured, but she was unscathed. Thinking of Qi Feng's words just now, Xiao Xiao should be back. In her previous life, she had not been able to wait for the big wedding, but now, at this time, with this cold-hearted and unfeeling person, she did not know whether it was a blessing or a curse. In the 8th Prince's Fu, an imperial guard knelt on the ground and reported, replying to Your Highness, there is news from the border that Tianjin cannot hold on any longer. The genie guards have already entered Tianjin's border, and Tianjin has surrendered. Xianli sat high up in the middle of the room, but his expression was very gentle. It was clear that his subordinate had reported such unpleasant news, but he seemed to be very happy. His smile was even like a spring breeze, which really made people feel that it was a little strange. The advisors did not dare to say a word. In the past year, Xianli had suffered from the Xia family's attack, but his conduct had become more and more stable. For example, not showing one's emotions had already been cultivated to the point of perfection. If Xianli could be said to be able to skillfully wear a gentle mask on his face before, now, this mask had already become one with Xianli. It's faster than I thought. Xianli sighed, is it really impossible to destroy the genie guards? Your Highness, at present, we have not completely gone against Jinying Wangfu, and Jinying Wang has always maintained a neutral position in the court. It is best to avoid them. An advisor came forward and advised. Currently, Xianli's strength had been weakened by more than half. It was not a wise move to confront Xiao Xiao head-on. Moreover, Xiao Xiao had never cared about the matters of the court. If they could avoid coming into direct contact with him, they would certainly be able to save a lot of trouble. It's too late. Xianli smiled, do you really think that we can get along peacefully with Jinying Wangfu? He waved the letter in his hand, everyone, do you know who was the one who set fire to the granary and caused the downfall of the Xia family? The advisors looked at each other. The people that Xianli had sent had been investigating this matter, but in the end, they had not found anything. Xianli was very angry because of this, and this was also a sore point of his. Now, looking at his appearance, did he already know who the person behind this was? Xianli calmly said, it was Jinying Wangfei, Jiang Ruan. How could it be? Everyone in the room was surprised, that Jinying Wangfei is only a woman, how could she have done such a big thing? Moreover, she cannot predict the future. If all of this was done by Jinying Wangfei, then isn't she too terrifying? Why would she do such a thing and go against your highness? I know that everyone is surprised, but this prince will tell you frankly that this matter was indeed done by Jinying Wangfei. He said meaningfully, you all think that it is impossible for Jinying Wangfei to do such a thing, and that she has no reason to go against this prince, but have you ever thought that this represents Jinying Wang's intention? As soon as these words came out, everyone was silent. Xianli looked around before saying, Jinying Wang Fei might not have received Jinying Wang's instructions. In fact, Xianli knew that these words were not credible. When he had learned from his spies that Jiang Ruan was the person behind the Xia family's disturbance, he had been extremely surprised, but he had almost immediately believed it. He had always felt that Jiang Ruan was a little strange, although he knew that this suspicion was somewhat inexplicable. The other party was just a young lady of an official family who did not understand anything. How could she have such powerful means? But every time he saw Jiang Ruan, Xianli would have an indescribable feeling. He always felt that Jiang Ruan had a hidden hatred towards him, although he had not done anything to make Jiang Ruan hate him. After knowing this news, Xianli was extremely furious. His great undertaking had been destroyed by the hands of a woman. Jiang Ruan's arrangement had caused him to waste the Xia family's resources. Later, he had even lost the 800 carriages of soldiers' pay. He had really suffered a double loss. Every time he thought of this, Xianli wished that he could immediately kill that woman. Xiao Xiao is about to return to the court. Xianli smiled, I want to give him a gift. Jinying Wang Fu was a very special existence in the Jin dynasty. For so many years, he could not even touch the true power of the genie guards. If he had previously had other thoughts about Jinying Wang Fu, now that he knew that Jiang Ruan had harmed him, it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Sometimes, some things had to be taken out of desperation. Xianli did not want Jiang Ruan to marry Xiao Xiao. If Jiang Ruan was really as scheming as the spies had reported, and she was together with Xiao Xiao, then the power of Jinying Wang Fu would be too terrifying. Taking advantage of the fact that Xiao Xiao had not returned, he needed to confirm one thing and also wanted to solve a problem. Xianli slowly clenched his fists. Chapter 181. Xia Qing and Qi Feng looked at each other, shrugged their shoulders and said, All right, the eldest sister-in-law is like a mother, I will listen to the third sister-in-law. Everyone stared at her blankly. Perhaps some people did not understand why Jiang Ruan, as a noble princess and the mistress of the entire Wang Fu, would be willing to stay here. She clearly knew that this was a conspiracy, yet she refused to retreat. That pair of beautiful eyes clearly had the look of a hungry wolf, solitary courage and extreme indifference. She was ignoring her own life. Lu Zhu rolled her eyes and simply bypassed housekeeper Lin and walked into the room without looking back. Jiang Ruan stood in front of everyone. The darker the night, the more beautiful her complexion became. In such a perilous situation, her gaze was like a threatening billow, and the corners of her mouth held a faint smile. She was calm, but everyone could feel the faint murderous intent emanating from her. She said, Everyone, there is no need for me to say anything more. Tonight, someone wants to break into Jinying Wang Fu. I do not know what their purpose is, but they have come with ill intentions. You are all people of Jinying Wang Fu. Now, someone wants to step into your courtyard, possibly kill your relatives, rob your treasures, or even accuse you of being an assassin. The servants of Jinying Wang Fu were carefully selected, so they were not stupid. It was very strange for the officers and soldiers to suddenly come to catch the assassins at such a late hour, so it was smart to keep an eye on them. Jiang Ruan smiled and said, It's nothing. Catching an assassin also requires an official seal and a token. Since you are not willing to open the door, it shows that they have not taken out these 2 tokens. Since they do not have these 2 tokens, they cannot prove their identity. Jinying Wang Fu is not some small family. Even if it is a small family, they cannot just barge in. You do not need to pay attention to these people. You have done very well. Housekeeper Lin was startled by the ruthlessness in Jiang Ruan's words and immediately replied, Yes. A woman's wedding dress originally carried all the hopes of a woman for the future, and she would use all her strength to make it more beautiful. In this life, she was not particularly tempted by all the beautiful things, but Xiao Xiao was actually so considerate. Lu Zhu was so shocked that her mouth was wide open. She stared blankly for a long time before muttering, Son-in-law is really generous. He wants Miss to wear the entire minister's mansion. Jiang Ruan's heart sank, and she coldly said, "It is indeed a good strategy to kill several birds with one arrow." She came back to her senses and looked at Qi Feng and Xia Qing. She smiled slightly and said, "In short, Xiao Xiao is coming back, and my elder brother is also coming back. I'm afraid that the originally stable situation in the capital will soon change again. Don't take it lightly recently. I'm not worried about young Master Qi, but young Master Xia." Everyone was shocked by her words, and Lu Zhu was a little anxious. "Miss, now is not the time to show off. Since those people dared to break into the prince's mansion at night, they must have some tricks up their sleeves. What if something happens to them? What does it have to do with you?" Qi Feng hit Xia Qing's head fiercely. "Third brother's money was not earned by you. This Jinying Wangfu was not built by you. Other people's money could be used however they wanted. What's wrong with third sister-in-law wearing a wedding dress? If I marry a wife like third sister-in-law, I will certainly do my best to find her a dress that matches her." As soon as he finished speaking, Qi Feng suddenly realized what he was saying. He could not help but pause and look at Jiang Ruan with some uneasiness. Everyone was shocked by these words that were almost cursed. They could not help but look up at this beautiful mistress. She was charming and bright, and her crimson dress fluttered like red flowers in the cold night wind. However, her tone was cruel and piercingly cold, as if she was an evil spirit that had climbed out of hell. The sneer that flowed out of the corner of her eyes contained a kind of contempt that was carved into her bones. Everyone was a little confused. Housekeeper Lin's palms trembled. He did not know why, but he felt that at this time, Jiang Ruan was very similar to Xiao Xiao. It was a kind of strength and tenacity that came from her bones. She would not be frightened by anything. Even if a knife was in front of her in the next second, she would still have the courage to calmly order her servants to lay out the plan. These two people were actually so bored to use this matter as a bet. Jiang Ruan blushed slightly with shame. She only felt that Xiao Xiao's fellow apprentices had a very lively temperament. She did not know how Xiao Xiao had been raised to be so taciturn. At this moment, Xia Qing's clear voice could be heard, but regardless of whether it is 50,000 or 100,000, third brother is really too wasteful. How can there be such an expensive piece of clothing? That money can be used to open a few more charity halls. Who knows how many people can be saved? Jiang Ruan coldly ordered, "Now, as Jinying Wangfei, I order all of you to return to your rooms and find a place to hide. All the imperial bodyguards of the Wangfu, gather here and focus on guarding Xiao Xiao's study and bedroom. If anyone intrudes, kill them without exception. Jin Air, find a way to rush out of the Wangfu. If there is a secret passage, that would be even better. Set all the houses around Jinying Wangfu on fire. Jin San and Jin Si, the two of you release the signal flares. The genie guards cannot appear, but the Zhao family can." Her eyes were incomparably cold and her tone was unfathomable. "If you want to step into this place, you must first see if you have the ability. Weigh the depth of Jinying Wangfu, and I will make sure that they will not be able to return." Jiang Ruan let Bai Ji and the others put away the wedding clothes and pushed open the door to walk out. As soon as she walked out, she saw Xia Qing and Qi Feng sitting in front of the stone table in the courtyard. Seeing her arrival, Qi Feng laughed and teased, "I heard from the servants in this fu that the wedding clothes of Bao Yulu have arrived. Fifth brother and I are currently making a bet." Everyone laughed again. Jiang Ruan's gaze fell on the wedding clothes and she could not help but shake her head. If this set of clothes were to be worn outside, she did not know what kind of commotion it would cause. Xiao Xiao's wedding clothes were equivalent to the entire property of a fifth-ranked official in the capital. It was estimated that after the marriage, even if she did not have the reputation of a demoness who brought disaster to the country, she would not be able to escape being a femme fatale. Housekeeper Lin looked at Lu Zhu and sternly said, "Since you have so many people by young Furin's side, you should also know the people that young Furin usually sees. This wedding banquet cannot be done carelessly. The more exquisite it is, the more it will show the respect that our Wang Fu has for young Furen. In this way, young Furen will have face, and as young Furen's servant, you will also be proud. Besides, since you have followed young Furen into the Wang Fu, you are also a part of the Wang Fu. You should regard yourself as one of us. Young miss, how can you be so impatient? Come, take a look. How about making this small porridge with a lighter Jiangnan flavor? At this moment, Jiang Ruan was thinking that in the blink of an eye, the time had come for her to marry Xiao Xiao. In this life, she was not willing to repeat the mistakes of her previous life, so every move she made was to avoid walking down the path of her previous life. In her previous life, she had not been able to become an upright wife. On the surface, an imperial concubine seemed to be glorious, but in actuality, she was still a concubine of the emperor. Becoming the young Furen of Jinying Wangfu was tantamount to having a solid backing. Xiao Xiao's power would make it much more convenient for her to do many things, but the most important thing was that she would be able to completely break away from Xian Li's shadow. In this life, she had finally severed her last connection with Xian Li in the matter of love. From now on, she would be a woman of the Xiao family, and not of the Xian family. Before your master left, he entrusted Jinying Wangfu to me, and I promised to protect its stability. Every plant and tree in this Fu may be closely related to the future of the Wangfu, so it cannot be taken lightly. So, tonight, I will also do the same. I will fulfill my promise to your master. I will not abandon this Wangfu and leave. I will be with you. Bandits have come in. If you do not leave, I will not leave either. I will stay here until the very last moment. Housekeeper Lin also rushed over from the courtyard outside. Seeing Jiang Ruan, he heaved a sigh of relief. Now, everyone in Jinying Wangfu regarded Jiang Ruan as a proper female master. Once something happened, as long as Jiang Ruan was present, they would bypass Housekeeper Lin and directly report to Jiang Ruan. Housekeeper Lin's usual playful expression had completely disappeared, and he sternly said, "Young Furen, this place is too dangerous. Later, let the embroidered uniform guards that Master left behind protect you as you leave this place. Master's keepsake is still there, so it will be able to protect you." Returning to the capital from the border was a long and arduous journey, and it would take some time before they could return. Even so, Jinying Wangfu still began to get busy. Every day, Housekeeper Lin arranged what to do after Xiao Xiao returned to the Fu. The most important thing was Xiao Xiao and Jiang Ruan's wedding. Before Xiao Xiao had left the capital, the Empress Dowager had issued an imperial decree that the marriage would be completed as soon as he returned to the court. Now that Jiang Ruan had also finished her mourning period, it was only a matter of time before she sat on the position of young Furen of Jinying Wangfu. Housekeeper Lin had been planning since he had received the imperial decree a year ago. Jiang Ruan had thought that everything was in order, but who knew that Housekeeper Lin was still worried about this matter. From the water essence beads stuck on the wedding invitation to the carved patterns on the ivory chopsticks used at the banquets, it was simply a matter of great importance. "Now, act immediately," she ordered. The entire body of the wedding dress was a bright red, but it was not an ordinary red. It was as if the rosy clouds in the sky were slowly enshrouding the clouds. It was warm, soft, and incomparably gorgeous. The fabric was a two-nest cloud-patterned cape, embroidered with gold and silver luan birds and phoenixes. The gold and silver threads were extremely fine, and every stitch was exquisitely embroidered. The luan birds stretched out their necks and flew in the air, and a colorful phoenix's tail was charming and gentle. The bottom was studded with colorful gems, and when it gently swayed, it was almost dazzling. Being praised by Jiang Ruan, the manservant blushed a little, but he immediately put on a deeply worried expression. "Young Furen is right, but those people are coming aggressively. From the entrance, I heard that the battle is not small. If you are not willing to open the door, I'm afraid that they will not leave the matter at that." Jiang Ruan quickly turned around and walked towards the main hall of the Wang Fu. It seems like a reckless action, but it happens to be at this time. If the genie guards are summoned, we can find out the true strength of Jinying Wangfu. If we abandon the Wang Fu and escape, we may be able to find out the secret of the Wang Fu. If we want to take someone's life, it will be even easier. They are simply bandits, but a clever bandit. Xianli, sure enough, was not so easy to get rid of. Now that she had made a move, it was so aggressive. She walked quickly, her footsteps not stopping at all. Her long fox fur cloak drew a gorgeous arc in the night. This matter should not be delayed. Old Lin, gather all the people in the Fu in the front hall. Tonight, no one is allowed to take a step out of Jinying Wangfu. Tianzhu stood quietly by Jiang Ruan's side. From the time she had followed Jiang Ruan, she understood that the master she followed was in some ways the same as the genie guards. No matter how the outside world changed, her heart would always be strong. Jiang Ruan muttered to herself for a moment, then shook her head. No. What do you mean? Steward Lin asked. Jiang Ruan turned a deaf ear to him and seemed to be thinking about something else. Qi Feng's eyes darkened. Xia Qing touched her head and said in an aggrieved tone, "Fourth brother, you are increasingly leaning towards third sister-in-law. She is not your wife, why are you so protective of her? Do you still want the friendship of fellow disciples? What do you want to bet?" Jiang Ruan smiled slightly. Jiang Ruan felt strange in her heart. She did not know when they were making the dress, so how did Xiao Xiao know her measurements? However, this was indeed not the time to worry about this. Although she knew that Bao Yulu had always made clothes for the concubines in the palace, even Jiang Ruan could not help but suck in a breath of cold air when she got her hands on this wedding dress. Steward Lin stared blankly and raised his head to look at Jiang Ruan. Jiang Ruan stared at him, her always smiling and charming eyes unexpectedly had a bit of sharpness. Steward Lin felt a chill in his heart and no longer dared to hide anything. He opened his mouth and said, "There is. Young master handles official documents in the Fu, and some secret matters are also discussed in the Fu. Although this old servant is not very clear, I know that there should be a lot of important things in the Fu. Although the protection is very good, it is inevitable that people will be able to use it against them." The phoenix coronet was also exquisite and small. It was not heavy, and wearing it would not be strenuous. The emerald green bird feathers sparkled and shone, reflecting an enchanting color. The phoenix coronet was adorned with jewels. The golden dragon, the emerald phoenix, and the jewels shone and shone brilliantly. It was magnificent, and not something that ordinary craftsmen could achieve. The golden dragon on the phoenix coronet soared above the emerald clouds, and the emerald phoenix spread its wings among the jewels and flowers. The most moving thing was the bead in the mouth of the emerald phoenix in the middle. The bead was crystal clear and smooth, and its color was faintly transparent. It could emit a bright luster as one walked. Wearing such a phoenix coronet, it really made one's whole body shine brightly. She spoke coldly, as if she was talking about something that would happen in other people's homes, but the hearts of the people below were shocked. Guessing what might happen and actually hearing the truth from someone else's mouth were two different things. Everyone's gaze changed slightly. As they were speaking, they heard someone report from outside, "Young madam, Master Xia and Master Qi have come to see you." Seeing that Jiang Ruan had an idea, Baiji did not obstruct her. After all, there were secret guards outside to protect her, so there would not be any big trouble. Jiang Ruan had just walked into the courtyard when she saw a manservant hurriedly run in. His tone was somewhat anxious as he said, "Young madam, there is a group of people outside. They claim to be officials who are here to arrest assassins. This lowly one does not dare to open the door and has come to ask for young madam's opinion." Not only that, there were also luxurious hairpins and ornaments, double-rang golden rings, 100 knots in the same heart, and wedding shoes embroidered with mandarin ducks. Jiang Ruan had already seen the splendor and riches of the palace in her previous life, and she had also seen the empress's court dress. At this moment, when she saw this, she could not help but be somewhat absent-minded. Housekeeper Lin's movements were indeed very fast. In less than the time it takes to burn half an incense stick, everyone had already gathered in the front hall of Jinying Wangfu. Jiang Ruan stood in the courtyard of the front hall, in front of everyone. Housekeeper Lin stood on one side, and Jean Eyre and a few secret guards followed behind Jiang Ruan without saying a word. Everyone's gaze fell on this future young madam of Jinying Wangfu. Tonight's situation was dangerous, yet this woman was not willing to escape alone. This action had already won the favor of the servants of Jinying Wangfu. There was not a single young lady in the capital who was not delicate and delicate. To have such courage and insight was already admirable. But if she was bold but not astute, it would not bring good luck to Jinying Wangfu. Therefore, everyone wanted to see what Jiang Ruan could come up with. Jiang Ruan nodded and closed the book. Just as she walked to the door, she heard a sound coming from outside. It seemed to be the sound of something exploding. She frowned. At this hour, how could there be any firecrackers? She always had a kind of unexpected intuition when it came to danger. Immediately, she put on a coat, stood up, and was about to walk out of the courtyard to take a look. It was windy at night. Baiji got up to close the window. Unexpectedly, she discovered that outside, it had already begun to drizzle sporadically. The cold winter night was already very cold, and when the rain fell on people's bodies, they immediately felt a slight chill. Baiji closed the window and looked at Jiang Ruan, who was still sitting at the table reading, and said, "Miss, you should rest early. When the rain gets heavier, be careful not to catch a cold." Human lives were not difficult to explain. Today, this Jinying Wangfu only had one more person. As for other things, Jiang Ruan looked at housekeeper Lin. How many imperial bodyguards are there in total in this fu? If Jinying Wangfu became the target of public criticism, and the other party dared to be so rampant tonight, they must have made excellent preparations. It was not safe for Jiang Ruan to stay here. In any case, the young madam of Jinying Wangfu would always be the first priority. Returning to the room, Lian Xiao and Baiji were surrounding Jiang Ruan for some unknown reason. Even Tian Zhu was standing to the side watching. Lu Zhu asked curiously, what is this?" Just as he finished speaking, as if to reflect his words, he saw the guard who was guarding the door rushing over. "Young madam, it's not good. Those people have already begun to force their way into the fu. This subordinate has taken a look. There are too many of them, and they are all armed with bows and arrows. They have come with ill intentions. I am afraid that it will be very dangerous." What Qi Feng had said was indeed correct. Not long after, the soldiers of Tianjin were defeated, and they bowed their heads to the great Jin dynasty. The fact that this war had lasted for so long was beyond everyone's expectations. The country of Tianjin was merely a small place, but they did not know when it had gained the power to contend with the great Jin dynasty. This was really thought-provoking. However, in any case, besides giving the great Jin dynasty a warning, they were still defeated. The emissary brought the letter of surrender and the great Jin army that had returned to the court with them to the capital to meet the emperor. Among them, the news of the ceding of land and reparations spread like wildfire. As for the specifics, each person had their own version of it, and no one knew which piece of news was true. Lu Zhu secretly laughed at the side. Xia Qing was unconvinced and said, "What about me? Third sister-in-law, how can you treat me differently?" Lu Zhu bypassed Steward Lin and made a begging gesture. "Steward Lin, this list of snacks has already been changed dozens of times. I really can't think of anything else. Please spare me, I am only a servant." "No." Jiang Ruan flatly refused. "Since these people dare to come here so arrogantly, they may have other intentions. I am afraid that they want to probe the depths of the brocade guards. Are there any secrets in this Wang Fu?" Lian Xiao burst out laughing and said, "Nonsense. What do you mean by wearing a minister's fu?" She took a look at the wedding dress that was so exquisite that it did not seem like something that could only be found in the mortal world. She laughed even more happily. How could the minister's fu have enough to buy this wedding dress? Ever since Jiang Quan's attitude towards Jiang Ruan had become colder and colder, and he had not even taken the initiative to ask about Jiang Ruan once in a year, the few servant girls by Jiang Ruan's side had already turned cold towards Jiang Quan. Originally, they had thought that one day, Jiang Quan would see the good in Jiang Ruan. After all, they were biological father and daughter. Even if the bones were broken, the tendons were still connected. How could it be broken just like that? But now, they no longer wanted to mention him. In any case, Jiang Ruan was about to marry into Jinying Wangfu. In the future, she would be a member of Jinying Wangfu, so why would she care about those unrelated people? Without this layer of apprehension, Lian Xiao was no longer polite when speaking to the Jiang Fu. Let's bet on how much third brother's wedding dress is worth. Xia Qing's baby face was exceptionally likable, and when she spoke in such a serious manner, she appeared even more adorable. Fourth brother, guess that it is 100,000 taels, I think it is 50,000 taels. The soft couch in front of Jiang Ruan was slanted with a layer of things. After walking closer, Lu Zhu could see clearly and could not help but exclaim, "What a beautiful wedding dress!" There are a total of 180 imperial guards. The manservants and maids all have some martial arts. Housekeeper Lin said, but compared to the people outside, these are like mantises trying to stop a chariot. They use bows and arrows. Moreover, the troops and horses are orderly. They are simply using the methods of an army to attack our Wang Fu. Young madam, this place is really dangerous. Before young master left, he should have left behind a token. If young madam must stay, how about calling the genie guards to protect young madam? Most of the wedding dresses that this woman wore when she got married were embroidered by herself. Moreover, she had already started sewing her own wedding dress a few years ago. The craftsmanship of the wedding dress also showed the woman's needlework. As the girl embroidered the wedding dress, her mood was naturally sweet. However, when Jiang Ruan received the Empress Dowager's decree, she was in too much of a hurry. Even though she had moved to Jinying Wangfu, she did not think about the wedding dress every day. Moreover, time was too tight, so she simply did not embroider. When the time came, she planned to ask a clothing shop in the capital to make one for her, as long as she did not lose Jinying Wangfu. Who knew that the shopkeeper of Baoyu Lu would come to deliver the wedding dress today? He said that when Xiao Xiao had left the capital, he had instructed Baoyu Lu to make it for him. What kind of person was Jinying Wang? If he accepted this order, he would be able to eat for 3 years. The shopkeeper invited the best embroidery maids and put in 120% effort. Finally, before Xiao Xiao returned, the dress was finished for Jiang Ruan. You are kind-hearted and have a gentle temperament. It is inevitable that you will be used by others. Jiang Ruan smiled. Before Xiao Xiao and the others returned to the capital, be careful. Qi Feng really wanted to ruthlessly beat up this young martial brother of his. However, in the blink of an eye, he saw that Jiang Ruan had a pensive look on her face and his movements slowed down. Generally speaking, Jinying Wangfu was like an impenetrable fortress. No one would think of breaking into Jinying Wangfu. However, at this critical juncture, when Xiao Xiao was about to return to the capital, he had brought troops with him. Moreover, he had used the formation of the army. Presumably, the outside had already been surrounded, and there was no one who could deliver a letter to other places. The other party had used such an obvious method. It was nothing more than to ask for 2 things. One was for human lives, and the other was for other things in Jinying Wangfu. Chapter 182. I was wondering what you all wanted to do, but now I understand. Her smile was like a flower, unstoppable in the firelight, but her voice had a startling coldness. Tonight, you won't be able to take my life, and you won't be able to probe the depth of the brocade guards. Of course, you won't be able to walk out of the gates of the Wang Fu, and you won't even have the chance to live. So I said, she shrugged her shoulders, it's too late. Jiang Ruan nodded. Now that Zhao Yi had arrived, she would only be a burden if she stayed, so she followed Tianzhu and the maidservant into the house. Who knew that halfway there, Tianzhu would be entangled by the death warriors? More and more death warriors surrounded her, and she was a live target. The secret guards were entangled with the mad death warriors, and no one could separate themselves to save her. Jiang Ruan glanced at Lian Xiao and the others, then turned and ran in the other direction. If they stayed with her, Lian Xiao and the others would also be implicated. Xia Qing woke up in a daze from her sleep. She dragged her shoes, put on her coat, and walked out of the house. Looking at the servant boy who was rushing over, she asked, "What's going on? Why is it so noisy outside?" Housekeeper Lin composed himself and said, "What's the matter with the signal flare? I've never heard young madam mention the signal flare." With the death of their leader, the people below him were in a mess. They could not care about anything else, and for a moment, they were in a chaotic mess with the city guards that Zhao Yi had brought. Jiang Ruan jumped up from her seat. The people on the roof were all the secret guards that Jean Eyre was familiar with. Just now, she had talked a lot with the man in the lead, but it was just to buy some time. The secret guards hiding in the dark would give these people the illusion that the brocade guards came and went like ghosts, and suppressed their spirit. At this moment, she could clearly see that these people were indeed death warriors. Now that the leader was dead, if they could not complete the mission tonight, they would die. She could only fight to the death. Zhao Yi and those people fighting in a chaotic battle might not necessarily be a sure win, but at this moment, distant water could not quench present thirst. Who else could help here? "Young madam, they have broken into the Wang Fu." An imperial bodyguard came to report. "No." The manservant scratched his head and said, "We don't have a big force here. I don't know what happened, but all the mansions on this street suddenly caught fire. I just heard a commotion outside saying that there were bandits." "Young master, it's better if you don't go out, stay in the house, I will go to find out more information." The bitterness and immense grief in that voice almost drowned a person in an instant. Before Jiang Ruan could react, in the next moment, a black shadow leaped over and grabbed her in a protective embrace, narrowly dodging the dangerous glint of the knife. She struggled to think, but did not notice that some of the death warriors were already close to her. Steward Lin had just finished giving instructions to the secret guard when Jiang Ruan walked alone to the courtyard entrance. Bai Ji and Lian Xiao cried out in alarm. Tian Zhu leaped up and kicked away the knife that was placed horizontally in front of Jiang Ruan. When Jiang Ruan turned around, Tian Zhu pulled her hand and hurriedly said, "Miss, you should first go into the house to hide, it's too chaotic here." Steward Lin was originally very anxious in his heart. For so many years, Jinying Wangfu had been like an iron wall that stood tall in the capital. But at this moment, he suddenly realized that those people did not dare to touch Jinying Wangfu because of Xiao Xiao. Now that Xiao Xiao was not here, this Jinying Wangfu was like a shabby house that had been stripped of its walls and tiles. The glory and splendor laid down by the ancestors was gradually fading, and the people were afraid of the genie guards and Xiao Xiao, not Jinying Wangfu. However, the future mistress of this Wangfu was working hard to protect it in a valiant manner. Seeing Jiang Ruan's cold and calm appearance, housekeeper Lin's uneasy heart gradually calmed down. "Stop them with all your strength, kill them directly. Kill one is one, kill two is one." Jiang Ruan slowly said, "I will still sit here, if anything happens, I will take responsibility." In a flash, people with torches in their hands quickly surrounded the courtyard, making it so that not even a drop of water could trickle through. These people were all wearing the uniform of officers and soldiers. At first glance, they really looked like officers on duty, but the murderous look in their eyes indicated their intentions. "It's already late at night, how could there be anyone here? If we don't make any noise, wouldn't we be silently accepting an ambush?" These people seem to be bold, but they still only dare to make a move at night, presumably to deceive people. Since they are using the guise of an official, I will not be polite and expose them. If all the houses on this street are on fire, it will inevitably alarm the people. As more and more people gather, as long as someone shouts that the robbers are here, there will certainly be people who will be suspicious. Killing and setting fires at night is not a small matter. There are not many guards in a fu, but the number of guards in each fu on a street is not small. Although we may not be able to deal with those people, it is impossible to silence them one by one. Their hearts are in a state of panic, so they will naturally have some misgivings. As long as they have misgivings, we will be able to find the exit. Only those who have experienced extreme pain and danger would have the courage to face any kind of killing intent without batting an eyelid. Her heart was extremely tenacious, as if she had not grown up in a large courtyard for the past 10 years, but had instead faced countless blood and blades on a road paved with the tip of a knife. Only then did she have a heart of stone. Jiang Ruan sat in the middle of the main hall with a gloomy expression. She was surrounded by a dozen or so bodyguards. Housekeeper Lin anxiously said, "Young madam, if you really do not wish to leave, you should at least find a place to hide. Don't stay here. What will we do when those people come in?" The more she said this, the more nervous the man became, as if someone had grasped his weak point. He could not help but be affected by her words, and was no longer as calm as before. He immediately made a gesture, wanting his subordinates to move, but just as he raised his hand halfway, he heard the sound of something piercing through the air. Before he had time to turn his head, he saw that there was an arrow in front of his chest. It was unknown where the arrow had come from, but it had passed right through his chest. Outside the courtyard of Jinying Wang's Fu, on the roof, it was unknown when a black shadow had appeared. These black shadows were quietly hidden in the darkness. Outside the door, someone shouted, "The bandits are rampant and unruly, the capital garrison Zhao Yi is here, quickly surrender." "My apologies, Junzhu," the man sneered, "on the road to the netherworld, this one will burn paper money for you." His expression was gloomy, but there was some suspicion in his gaze. "Gongzi, the Fu is on fire," the manservant hurriedly replied. The young girl dressed in red slowly raised her head, revealing a charming and bright face. She seemed to have just noticed the fire in the courtyard, and her expression changed slightly. After a moment, it disappeared, and she revealed an extremely shallow smile. "Exactly." At this moment, the imperial bodyguards protecting Jiang Ruan stood quietly outside the main hall. Inside the main hall, the servant girls were standing on both sides, fiddling with the silver wire charcoal in the stove. The bearded housekeeper stood at the side, gently flipping through something that looked like an account book. No one looked in their direction, and no one spoke, as if all the sounds had disappeared. And these people did not seem to have seen the scene of them leading the troops into the courtyard. Time passed slowly in everyone's nervous mood, and every moment seemed extremely long and difficult to bear. Before the tea on the table had cooled, they heard the roars of the imperial bodyguards outside. The other party had rushed into the courtyard. This scene was too beautiful, so beautiful that one could not bear to be disturbed. However, the leader composed himself, and with a wave of his hand, his subordinates slowly approached the main hall. "Is it Hong and Junzhu? What does the fire have to do with us?" Jiang Ruan asked in reply. Housekeeper Lin was stunned, only to hear Jiang Ruan lightly say, "In any case, it was caused by those impersonating officials, and we are also victims. As for the Yin merits," she smiled slightly, "this life has not yet ended, so what's the use of worrying about things after death? The people who will die tonight are not us." When she said the last sentence, her tone had already turned cold, and there was a faint sense of awe. After saying this, she no longer cared about Xiaqing and turned to leave. Housekeeper Lin's heart stirred, and he did not speak anymore. He did not know whether it was a coincidence, but the temperament of the people Xianli used was somewhat similar to his, especially when it came to being suspicious. The calmer Jiang Ruan appeared, the more nervous they were, fearing that there was some conspiracy. It was also for this reason that they were hesitant to make a move here. Most likely, they were afraid that she would play some tricks, or perhaps Xianli had warned them before leaving. Just as she ran to a corridor in the courtyard, her ankle was suddenly grabbed by someone. Jiang Ruan looked down and saw that a seriously injured soldier had actually woken up at this moment, and used all his strength to grab her foot. This person was extremely strong, and no matter how hard she struggled, she could not break free. Seeing this, another soldier raised his knife and slashed at Jiang Ruan's head without thinking. Jiang Ruan was unable to move, and just stood there like a live target, watching the knife fall on her head. It seemed that she was about to lose her life on the spot. She always had a calming tone, and seemed to be able to accurately grasp the most volatile parts of people's hearts. For example, at this moment, her words immediately aroused the bodyguard's desire to protect her. If a woman could face death with equanimity, as a member of the Wang Fu, how could they cower in front of a hungry wolf? Unknowingly, she had unexpectedly become the backbone of the entire Jinying Wang Fu. It seemed that as long as she was there was nothing worthy of panic or fear. Qi Feng, who had just run to the Jiang Fu to find Jiang Yuan, saw this scene, and immediately cried out in a heart-wrenching voice, "Jiang Yuan!" After those people surrounded the courtyard, for a moment, they did not act blindly without thinking. The person in the lead walked out. Most likely, today's matter had not been carried out according to plan. When he had accepted the task, his master had also said that if he met Jiang Yuan, there would most likely be some unforeseen events. At first, he did not take it to heart. She was just a woman, and at most, she could only rely on a man's influence to wield a bit of power. Chickens were flying and dogs were jumping, it was very lively. A trace of disdain flashed in Jiang Yuan's eyes. If she had been in this person's position, he would never have been so dilatory. In a life-and-death situation, the most important thing was to be ruthless. Being overcautious would only ruin one's own life. She sighed softly, but did not speak. Qi Feng was about to speak when he suddenly stopped and stared unblinkingly at a certain place in the sky. Xia Qing followed his gaze and saw clearly that in the sky in the southwest, a firework had unknowingly bloomed. The firework was not very big, but the sound was very clear and it was particularly crisp in the night. Xia Qing was startled and said, "At this time, who still has the mood to play with fireworks? Fourth brother, what do you think is going on?" She turned back to ask Qi Feng, but when she turned her head, she was stunned by Qi Feng's expression. Qi Feng's face was a little pale, and there was a trace of panic in his usually calm and shrewd eyes. He whispered, "Something happened, something must have happened to her. I have to go and see." Jiang Yuan laughed softly. Everything was unbelievably calm. Originally, it was a very common and warm scene, but it seemed a little strange and even a little strange here. At this moment, Jiang Yuan's heart was not as calm as it seemed on the surface. Even if the General Fu was not far from here, those people must be Xian Li's death soldiers, and they would not be merciful. If she entered this courtyard before Zhao Yi arrived with his troops, everything would be unknown. However, no matter what she thought in her heart, she could not reveal anything on her face. The most frightening thing in this world was to reveal the truth. If her expression wavered even a little, it would affect the servants of Jinying Wang Fu. Jiang Yuan walked to the main hall, and from time to time, she listened to the guards talking about the situation outside. Sure enough, the fire had activated its power. Perhaps they did not expect that it would suddenly alarm so many people. The people outside were obviously going crazy, and they simply stopped pretending to be soldiers and directly broke in. The guards of Jinying Wang Fu were all skilled in martial arts, and for a moment, they did not let those people gain the upper hand. However, they were outnumbered, and the other party was coming in menacingly, so they were afraid that they would not be able to hold on for long. What does Junju mean? The man became more and more suspicious. However, he heard Jiang Yuan's smiling voice, "It's too late." On the way to Jinying Wang Fu, his subordinates and the guards confronted each other and deliberately put on a ferocious posture. Originally, they wanted to cause chaos in the entire Fu to act conveniently. However, along the way, they did not see a single manservant or servant girl. Apart from the well-trained guards, they did not see a single person panicking. The soundless fighting simply did not have the effect of intimidation. Even when they wanted to find someone to ask about the secret, they did not see anyone. Everyone felt very strange. At this moment, when they arrived, they saw a group of guards protecting the main hall. In their hearts, they knew that it must be the mistress. In fact, their people had long since stationed outside. If Jiang Yuan were to escape from Jinying Wang Fu, she would inevitably be pursued by them. Before the arrival of the genie guards, Jiang Yuan might not be able to escape. Naturally, they had thought of a foolproof plan, but they had overlooked the fact that Jiang Yuan had not left Jinying Wang Fu at all. She had no intention of escaping. Her words were extremely cold, but the surrounding guards and steward Lin, who had been ordered to protect her, were secretly alarmed. They could not help but admire her in their hearts. At that time, the servants of Jinying Wangfu had also discussed which woman in the world could be a match for Xiao Xiao. In the end, only the daughter of the Yao family could barely be considered one. The daughter of the Yao family was proficient in the 4 arts, she was also incomparably intelligent. Her appearance and family background were all top-notch. But if Xiao Xiao were to marry her, what kind of situation would there be today? At least, it would not be better than now. Perhaps the daughter of the Yao family was equally intelligent as Jiang Ruan, and her appearance was difficult to distinguish, but she could never be a Jinying Wang Fei like Jiang Ruan. This was because the noble young ladies who grew up in the aristocratic families were well versed in the ways of the rich and powerful, but they did not have a biting cold killing intent. They were used to dealing tactfully in the deep residences, not the cruel killing in the dark of the night. The one you are protecting is not me, Jiang Ruan said indifferently, it is Jinying Wangfu. Steward Lin suddenly understood and said, young madam's idea is not bad, but if someone were to ask about it the next day, what would happen to the fire? Burning someone's house is detrimental to one's virtue. This is really too dangerous. Steward Lin was somewhat helpless. Jiang Ruan's temperament was the same as Xiao Xiao's. Once she had decided on something, even 9 oxen could not pull her back. Moreover, this method of risking one's life was not something that people who cherished their lives would do. Jiang Ruan had completely disregarded her own life and death. This was not a matter of great righteousness. Steward Lin had lived for so many years that he could see people very accurately. It was clear that Jiang Ruan had never placed her own safety in her heart. Her methods were swift and fierce, and her heart was ruthless. If she had enough bargaining chips to achieve her goal, even her life could be used as a bargaining chip. However, now that Jiang Ruan had made up her mind, it was impossible to change it. Steward Lin sighed and could only ask, young madam, what did you mean by those words just now? Why would you let people burn the houses around Jinying Wangfu? This was really too stupid. The leader felt that it was inconceivable, because under such circumstances, protecting the most important person in the Fu was the right thing to do. He had heard that Xiao Xiao was angry and concerned about this Hong and Junju. Since this was the case, her safety should have been the first priority. However, Jiang Ruan simply did not leave Jinying Wangfu. This was originally an accident. The ice-cold embrace still carried a familiar clear fragrance. Jiang Ruan stared blankly for a moment. The person under the moonlight was as cold as ice and frost as he spat out 2 words, courting death. Everyone was startled. The leader slowly fell down. Jiang Ruan's voice, which seemed to be far and near, reached his ear with an inexplicable sarcasm, along the way to the underworld, may the gentleman have a safe journey. Ah. That person was startled and almost took 2 steps back. He only felt that Jiang Ruan's eyes were astonishingly bright and unexpectedly had a threatening awe. He composed himself and said coldly, Junju, why do you need to deceive yourself and others? Death is at hand, yet you are still so stubborn. Shut up. Qi Feng shouted in a low voice, you stay here and don't go anywhere. Don't add to my troubles. As he said this, he rushed out of the courtyard and his figure disappeared into the night. This was already a one-sided situation. It's too late. Jiang Ruan said calmly, the genie guards will not come. Your master will not be able to probe anything. Ah. Xia Qing's drowsiness immediately sobered up. She anxiously said, how could there be a fire? Is anyone injured? The leader took a few steps forward. A woman dressed in red was sitting on the main seat in the main hall. She wore a light red brocade dress embroidered with plum blossoms and a fiery red fox fur cloak over her head. The fox fur cloak was glossy and smooth, and the fur was bright. In the night, it was as dazzling as a group. What was even more dazzling than the fox fur was the woman's appearance. She held a small heater in her hand and slightly lowered her head. Her long and curly eyelashes trembled gently. Her eyes were like limpid autumn waters, Her skin was whiter than snow, her lips were red, and her teeth were white. Although they had not seen her full face, they already felt that every move she made was indescribably wonderful. What's too late? The man was stunned and then sneered, is it the genie guards who have come to rescue? Bandits? Xia Qing was stunned, which bandits are so rampant to burn a street full of houses? This is too much. As he was speaking, he saw Qi Feng walking out of the other room with his outer clothes on. Qi Feng was obviously much more sober than him. Xia Qing hurriedly said, "Fourth brother, were you also woken up? Why do you think there are bandits here? Isn't it very peaceful under the emperor's feet? This is too dangerous." The servants of Jinying Wang's Fu were well trained. When Jiang Ruan gave the order, they scattered like birds and beasts. The manservants and maids with low martial arts skills all found a place to hide. The guards with martial arts skills were lying in ambush in Xiao Xiao's study and bedroom. Chapter 183. Before the two suicide warriors could clearly see the situation in front of them, they felt a chill in their chests as a long sword passed through their chests. Xiao Xiao threw away the sword in his hand and carried Jiang Ruan horizontally. He only said behind him, "Leave no one alive, kill." Just as he reached the door, he heard the sounds of people and horses fighting outside. A silhouette hurriedly ran over. When he saw Jiang Ruan in Xiao Xiao's arms, his forehead twitched. At that moment, he did not care too much and called out, "Ruan. Eldest brother." Jiang Ruan was stunned. Jiang Xing was standing in front of her. Perhaps he had rushed over too quickly, but he looked travel-worn. Jiang Ruan asked curiously, "Why did you return to the capital so early?" Even though the news had said that they would arrive in a few more days, these two people had suddenly returned today. What was going on? Jiang Xing glanced at Xiao Xiao and said, "I felt somewhat uneasy, so we urged our horses to rush back first." After a pause, he looked at the chaotic battle in the courtyard and complained, "You are really something. Usually you are so smart, but at this time you are stupid. If we had not come back today and encountered this scene, if something had happened to you, how would I explain it to mother? In the future, if you encounter this kind of thing again, don't worry about anything else. Your own safety is the most important." In the end, it was difficult to calm down. Jiang Xing looked at Xiao Xiao and said, "I am really worried about leaving you here." Jiang Ruan patted Xiao Xiao and motioned for him to put her down. Xiao Xiao let go and Jiang Ruan stood still. She then said to Jiang Xing, "Today, they came for me. It is the same no matter where we go." Jiang Xing wanted to say a few more words, but he was afraid that Jiang Ruan would feel wronged after being shocked today. In the end, he endured it and just grabbed her hand and said, "In any case, it is not safe here. Come back to the Fu with me first." Xiao Xiao grabbed Jiang Ruan's arm and said with an icy gaze, "She will not leave, she will stay here." The two of them held her in the middle with one hand each, and the atmosphere was deadlocked. Jiang Xing said, "She is still unmarried. How can she stay here? She is a person from Jinying Wang Fu." Xiao Xiao said lightly, "Don't say any more." Jiang Ruan shook off their hands, a faint layer of melancholy rising in her heart. Looking at Jiang Xing, he said, "Eldest brother, it is already very late, and it is inconvenient to return to the Jiang Fu now. Moreover, it is inevitable that there will be spies sent by Xianli outside, so we should avoid more trouble. I'll just stay here tonight." Only then did Xiao Xiao's expression soften a bit. Jiang Xing, on the other hand, was flustered. He thought to himself that girls were indeed attracted to their husbands. She hadn't even gotten married yet and she was already leaning towards him. He could not help but feel somewhat wronged in his heart, but he also knew that Jiang Ruan's words were indeed reasonable. For a moment, his mood was very complicated. As soon as Jiang Ruan saw Jiang Xing's appearance, she knew what he was thinking. For a moment, she felt somewhat helpless. She did not know why this big brother of hers, who had been fighting for so many years, had become so childish. He could only comfort him, I don't think it's safe outside. Big brother, don't leave. I have something to ask you. Tidy up and rest here for the night. Xiao Xiao was just about to flatly refuse when he heard Jiang Xing immediately say, fine. For your sake, I'll stay here tonight. Xiao Xiao, the troops that Xiao Xiao had brought with him moved very quickly. In a flash, almost all of the kamikaze soldiers had been slaughtered. His subordinates were also very experienced. The courtyard was immediately cleaned up, not even a trace of blood was left behind. Jiang Xing sat under the oil lamp. There was still some dissatisfaction in his tone. It looks like this isn't the first time. How many people have died in Jinying Wangfu? Do you really want to live in such an ominous place? Big brother, what's wrong with you? Jiang Ruan asked. Ever since Jiang Xing saw her, he seemed to oppose Xiao Xiao with equal harshness. His behavior was really too obvious. Originally, although Jiang Xing could not be said to have liked Xiao Xiao, it was not to the extent that he was filled with hostility like he was now. Jiang Ruan also had doubts in her heart. Could it be that something had happened at the border? But would Xiao Xiao bully Jiang Xing for no reason? Jiang Xing averted his eyes and paused for a moment before saying, you really want to marry him? From Jiang Xing's point of view, he had been on a campaign outside for a few years. Suddenly, he found out that Xiao Xiao and Jiang Ruan had been bestowed a marriage. Naturally, he was extremely angry. If he had been there, it would have been fine. But this matter had happened in his absence. From his point of view, Xiao Xiao was taking advantage of someone's difficulties. It was as if a cabbage that he had painstakingly planted had been taken away for no reason. Naturally, he was unhappy. Big brother, this is the Empress Dowager's decree. Jiang Ruan sighed, I cannot defy and disobey. Moreover, there is nothing wrong with marrying into Jinying Wangfu. There is no mother-in-law or sister-in-law for me to serve. It is very peaceful and refreshing. You are my younger sister, Jiang Xing said sternly. Although he is young and promising, and has a good appearance, he still has a bad reputation. Moreover, he is cold and cheerless. A girl like you does not know what marriage means. What good is it to be with an ice-cold person day and night? When Jiang Xing looked at his younger sister, there was no one who was not good. When he looked at Xiao Xiao, he naturally felt that he was not worthy of Jiang Ruan. How could he have a good expression? What does reputation count for? Jiang Ruan smiled faintly, Big brother, have you forgotten? At that time, I still had the reputation of being a jinx. Is this true? That was falsely accused by others. How can you take it seriously? When this matter was mentioned, Jiang Xing felt a lump in his chest. At that time, he could only blame himself for being incompetent. He did not know that Xia Yan and her family had sinister intentions, causing Jiang Ruan to be branded with such a bad name and causing her to suffer so many years of grievance in the rural residence. Since I was falsely accused, why can't he be falsely accused? Jiang Ruan shook her head. Besides, Big brother, you have been at the border for so long and have interacted with him. You should have some understanding of him. Don't you know what kind of person he is? Jiang Xing was at a loss for words. In reality, although Xiao Xiao was cold and cheerless, his subordinates were respectful and submissive to him. To judge a person, one had to look at the attitude of the people around him. Since Xiao Xiao's subordinates were so loyal to him, he himself must also be outstanding. Moreover, on the battlefield, this person's courage and insight were indeed admirable. It was undeniable that he was an extremely powerful youth. When he was with Jiang Ruan, he could absolutely protect her. However, no matter how Jiang Xing thought about it, he still did not feel good. He sullenly said, Ruan, every word you say is on his side. You look like you don't care, but in reality, you have him in your heart. This is always true. This time, it was Jiang Ruan who was at a loss for words. She glared at Jiang Xing for a long time before saying, "Big brother, it doesn't matter who I marry. Although the Empress Dowager dotes on me, the country of the Jin dynasty is more important than my personal safety. The higher my status, the more favor I will receive from the imperial family, and the more likely I will become a bargaining chip for the imperial family in the future. Do you still remember Princess Yuanrong? Everyone can see that I am like a second Princess Yuanrong in front of the Empress Dowager. Who can be sure that in the future, I will not become a second Princess Yuanrong?" Jiang Xing was shocked and anxiously said, "Don't talk nonsense. Big brother also knows what I mean." Jiang Ruan shook her head. "Princess Yuanrong is the biological daughter of Empress Dowager Ida, but she still ended up like that. I don't have the slightest bit of blood relationship with the imperial family. Who knows if there will be a day when the situation will suddenly change. As for that father of mine, he hates us to the core. If I can pave a path for his official career, he will be more than happy to do so. My days look like they are full of flowers, but in reality, every step is filled with danger. Marrying Xiao Xiao, his temperament is cold and cheerless, but it will also save me some trouble. It is the same no matter who I marry. If I marry him, at least I will have a bargaining chip. Our relationship as allies is stronger than any other relationship." "You?" Jiang Xing was shocked and angry. "What nonsense are you talking about? How can marriage be used as a bargaining chip? Whatever you want, I will help you fight for it. I will protect you, but you cannot treat your husband as an ally. He is the person you have to share your heart with, the person you will accompany for a lifetime. If you say this, what kind of position do you place yourself in?" "Big brother, I am not in the mood for romance." Jiang Yuan said faintly, "You and I have been accustomed to mother's ending since we were young, and there will always be a barrier in our hearts that cannot be crossed. If I marry into Jinying Wangfu, if he is really my husband, after a long time, allies will naturally become husband and wife. But this is something that needs to be done slowly." She lied to Jiang Xinji. In this life, her resistance to marriage and the blockade of her own feelings were not because of Zhao Mei's ending. Instead, it was because she had poured her heart and soul into him in her previous life, only to be betrayed and killed. It would not be easy for her to completely get rid of that shadow in this life. But she could not tell Jiang Xing about this. When Jiang Xing heard this, he did not know how to persuade Jiang Yuan. Once his sister made up her mind, no one could sway her. He sighed and patted her head. "You are so young, but you are like a little old woman. I don't know who you got your temperament from." Jiang Yuan smiled faintly, and the two siblings talked about other things. In the study room at the other end, Xiao Xiao sat at the table while Xia Qing and Qi Feng sat opposite. Xia Qing was worried and rushed over, but unexpectedly found that Xiao Xiao had returned. She was immediately surprised. At this moment, sitting in the study room of Jinying Wangfu, she finally had the mood to ask her own question, "Third brother, why didn't big brother come back with you? He brought the army to escort us." Xiao Xiao said. "He rushed over at full speed, but who knew that Jiang Xing would also follow? The army could not be without a leader, so naturally, Guanliang Han was left alone." Qi Feng sat in his seat, thinking about something. He did not say a word. Seeing this, Xia Qing touched his arm. "Fourth brother, what's wrong with you? From the beginning until now, you look like your soul has left your body. Just now when you heard that there was a fire, you rushed out. Why are you so anxious?" At night, the snow was so deep that it was almost knee-deep. The weather was surprisingly cold, but the streets and alleys did not cool down because of the extremely cold weather. Instead, they talked about the incident that the street in the north of the city was flooded last night. The hawkers were talking about it. They all said that there seemed to be robbers from the host's family. But after a long time, the guards in the mansion dared to go out to investigate, but there was no movement. It was just that the series of houses were destroyed, but the people who lived in the prosperous corner of the north of the city were either rich or noble. They did not care about the few taels of silver, but after all, it was difficult to calm down and felt that it was a little unlucky. In the 8th prince's mansion, Xianli held his forehead, and his expression showed a little anxiety. Until now, there had been no news of last night's attack. Even the spies that had been sent had not returned. Xianli was well aware of what this meant, but to convince himself that everything pointed to disaster, Xianli was very unwilling. He had thought of the possibility that the people he had sent would be completely annihilated, but at least there would be people to report the situation of the genie guards. Jiang Ruan was only a woman, how could he order her to be killed without mercy? Moreover, the attack that night had been very sudden, and Jiang Ruan had not been fully prepared on how to retreat unscathed. Xianli was very confident in these matters, but after waiting for an entire night, there was still no news. When the spies that had been sent out arrived outside Jinying Wangfu, they could no longer find out anything. Jinying Wangfu was impregnable, and even a fly could not fly in. It was even more difficult to obtain information. After several fruitless returns, Xianli felt even more uneasy. Early this morning, the incident of a street in the north of the city catching fire had spread like wildfire. This incident was definitely related to Jinying Wangfu. Xianli knew that this was a method that Jiang Ruan used to confuse the public, but he could do nothing about it. Just as he was thinking, 2 manservants carried a box in and placed it in the middle of the room. They said to Xianli, "Your Highness, Zhang Daren has sent a salute, please have a look." It was a common thing for his subordinates to send gifts from time to time, but today, Xianli was not in the mood to do so. He impatiently waved his hand and said, "Open it." The box slowly opened, and before Xianli could see what was inside, he heard the 2 manservants and the guard beside him gasp. Perhaps they were afraid of startling him, so they did not scream, but their rapid breathing still made Xianli frown. He turned his head to look, and his body stiffened. He could no longer shift his gaze away. A series of human heads were neatly arranged in the box. The badly mutilated appearance made one's heart feel suffocated. However, one could vaguely make out their features. 5 spies, one was the leader of the assassins, and the remaining heads were neatly arranged, as if mocking him for his incompetence. Xianli felt a sweetness in his throat, and he only felt a gush of melancholy gushing out from his chest, as if he was about to spit it out. With difficulty, he swallowed the sweet blood in his throat. Xianli turned his head and gloomily stared at the 2 manservants who had dragged the box in. How did this thing get in? The 2 manservants had long been frightened by the sudden turn of events, and when they heard Xianli's words, they simultaneously knelt down and repeatedly begged for mercy. "Your Highness, please have mercy." Zhang Daren's subordinate placed the box at the door, and we brought it in like this. "Your Highness, please have mercy." Xianli exerted force in his palm, and the cup in his hand shattered. The porcelain bottle in the cup scratched his hand, and fresh blood slowly flowed out between his fingers, but he seemed to be completely unaware of it. The bodyguards at the side did not dare to breathe loudly, because Xianli's expression was extremely distorted. The corners of his mouth were clearly curled up, but his muscles were trembling uncontrollably. It was obvious that he was anxious with anger. If one were to say that Xianli's heart was sullen, then it was not unjust. Originally, Xiao Xiao had been protecting Jinying Wangfu, so there was no way to find the exit. Now that Xiao Xiao was not here, only Jiang Ruan could make decisions in Jinying Wangfu. He had actually fallen into the hands of a weak woman. What was up with this severed head? Sending it over in such a dignified manner was clearly a provocation. Xianli seemed magnanimous, but his heart was extremely narrow-minded. This action almost completely drew out the dark side of his heart. The person who had done such a thing was truly unforgivable. Just as he was deep in thought, a secret guard came in from outside to report. When he saw Xianli, he immediately reported, replying to Your Highness, this subordinate has just received news that Jinying Wang has returned to the capital. Xianli's gaze was like a torch, and he immediately looked towards that person. His palm unconsciously exerted force, and blood dripped down. 2 flowers bloomed, one on each side. At this time, Jinying Wangfu was full of life. Everyone was naturally happy that the young master had returned. Last night had been so dangerous, and everyone had thought that there would be a fierce battle to be fought. However, at the critical moment, Xiao Xiao had suddenly rushed back. Everyone was happy and rejoiced. Originally, after getting along for a year, the servants of Jinying Wangfu were very fond of Jiang Ruan. Although this young madam seemed a little cold, she never made any requests, and she was also very considerate in giving the servants gifts during the New Year and other festivals. Which young miss of a noble family did not have a small temper? This young madam was also very easy to get along with, and she almost did not put on any airs. After last night, Jiang Ruan had displayed a strong and tenacious scene in front of everyone. Immediately, her image in the hearts of the servants rose, and she had practically subdued their hearts at that time. From then on, she had become the well-deserved mistress in the hearts of all the servants of Jinying Wangfu. This was simply what everyone expected. Therefore, when Xiao Xiao returned, the servants consciously created all opportunities for the future virtuous couple to interact with each other. Jiang Ruan had just finished her breakfast when Lu Zhu walked over and said, "Miss, it's snowing outside, do you want to go and take a look?" It was snowing every day, so there was nothing to see. However, there was nothing to do in the room, so Jiang Ruan stood up. Seeing this, Lian Xiao hurriedly found a fire rat fur cloak and draped it over her. She also stuffed a small silver-carved heater into her hands. Be careful not to catch a cold. The few of them walked out of the room and entered the courtyard. From afar, they saw a person sitting in the pavilion. Lu Zhu blinked and pretended to be surprised. Isn't that the son-in-law?" "Miss, the son-in-law is over there, do you want to go and take a look?" Her voice was extremely loud, so the people in the pavilion heard her and turned their heads to look in her direction. Even if she wanted to pretend that she did not see them, it would be impossible. Jiang Ruan glared at Lu Zhu. Lu Zhu touched her nose and looked up at the sky. Jiang Ruan sighed, lifted her skirt, and walked towards the pavilion. A few servant girls consciously did not follow her and stood far away outside the pavilion, waiting. Xiao Xiao sat in the pavilion. Today, he wore a soap-green official robe embroidered with a qilin and silver pattern. The cuffs were embroidered with fine gold thread, which made his entire person look like jade. Draped over his head was an ink-colored cloak, and his figure was tall and slender. At this moment, it was unknown what he was thinking of, but he frowned slightly. His long eyelashes drooped, his appearance was elegant and beautiful, and his temperament was cold and elegant. It was really very attractive. Jiang Ruan sat down in front of him and thought for a while. Seeing the teapot on the table, she reached out and poured herself a cup of tea. Xiao Xiao looked at her without saying anything, and the atmosphere became a little strange. Finally, it was Jiang Ruan who broke the silence and said, "Thank you very much for last night." Hearing such polite words, Xiao Xiao's frown deepened, and his tone became slightly cold. "Between you and me, there is no need to say these things." He was a little strange. Jiang Ruan noticed his abnormality and asked curiously, "What happened?" Xiao Xiao turned his head away and paused before saying, "I have already returned to the capital, and the matter of the wedding banquet should also be prepared. Today, I will enter the palace to meet the emperor and explain this matter. Have you thought it through?" Jiang Ruan was stunned, as she had not expected him to talk about this matter. She smiled slightly. "I have thought it through." "When? Just say it." She was so straightforward, without the slightest trace of bashfulness. Xiao Xiao's expression relaxed slightly. Suddenly, he thought of something and said, "I have heard about the situation last night from Jiner. Thank you for guarding Jinying Wangfu for me. But in the future, there is no need to do so." His gaze was chilly, and his thin lips were pursed as if they were carved by a knife. He said, "In the Wangfu, the most important thing is not honor or secrets, but you." Jiang Ruan was startled, and her heart was somewhat baffled. She smiled, "Since I am the mistress here, I naturally have to bear some responsibility. Actually, after all, you are my Xiao Xiao's woman." Xiao Xiao interrupted her words, "You do not need to do anything." Chapter 184. Jiang Ruan was slightly taken aback. She felt that Xiao Xiao's words seemed to carry an inexplicable emotion. Feeling strange, she looked up at him. This young man stared straight at her, a pair of deep and cold black eyes that seemed to look into one's heart. On the surface, Xiao Xiao was cold and indifferent, but in reality, he was strong and overbearing. For example, at this moment, his words seemed to contain some intention of taking her for himself. As Jiang Ruan thought about it, she shook her head in her heart. Xiao Xiao had always been introverted, and was not like this kind of person who showed his emotions. After a pause, she said, "You're right." She changed the topic. "Now that you have returned to the court, I think His Majesty will have a headache about what to give you." Xiao Xiao originally had a high position and power, and it was not an exaggeration to say that he could walk sideways among the officials of the great Jin dynasty. As the saying goes, one's achievements overshadow their masters, but it was completely unnecessary when it came to him. Many years ago, the emperor had spared no effort in bestowing him with rewards, except for the position of the emperor. Now, with every meritorious service he made, he did not lack gold and silver, and his official rank had already reached the first rank. He really could not find anything else. Jiang Ruan suddenly thought of something and smiled. "After thinking about it, it seems that I can only bestow some beauties to you." Xiao Xiao did not expect Jiang Ruan to suddenly bring up this matter. He looked at her and lightly said, "No need. His Majesty wholeheartedly supports you." Jiang Ruan looked at the teacup in front of her. "Since you have returned to the court, the Empress Dowager's decree must be carried out. But now that the Jiang Fu has declined, marrying me will not bring you any benefits. His Majesty is always thinking of you, so naturally, he is not willing. At first, I heard that His Majesty intended to betroth the daughter of the Yao family to you. This time, you have made such a meritorious service. A marriage in exchange for assistance is more direct than any gold, silver, or jewels." Jiang Ruan's words were not groundless. Ever since the news of the great victory at the border arrived, Jiang Ruan had heard from Empress Dowager Ida's Gugu that the emperor had begun to frequently summon Governor Yao. Jiang Ruan knew that Xiao Xiao carried many secrets, just like her. She did not understand why the emperor was so protective of Xiao Xiao, but it was obvious that the emperor's heart was biased towards Xiao Xiao. The emperor was very dissatisfied with her being genieing Wang Fei. If it wasn't for Xiao Xiao, he would have replaced her long ago. Now, after so many years, Xiao Xiao had once again entered the court and obtained such a great merit. How could the emperor let go of this opportunity? Since ancient times, emperors had always liked to arrange the lives of others. She spoke frankly, as if she didn't have any negative emotions. Xiao Xiao looked at her quietly and did not speak. His complexion was quite good. Perhaps it was because he stayed at the border for some time, but the coldness in his bones was completely aroused. This time, her temperament seemed to be even colder. Her entire body was filled with a biting cold aura. However, her eyebrows were like a painting and her face was beautiful beyond compare. Suddenly, there was a hint of a smile on her face. Immediately, one would feel that she was cold and evil. His voice was devoid of emotion as it drifted indifferently towards Jiang Ruan's ears. "Then, what do you think?" Jiang Ruan's hand, which was holding onto the heater, tightened. The young man opposite her, dressed in black, was as black as ink. Yet, in an indifferent tone, he asked again, "Do you wish for me to take in someone else?" In a split second, Jiang Ruan's entire body abruptly froze. Her hands were clearly holding onto the warm stove, but she suddenly felt as if she had fallen into an icehouse. Because, in her previous life, she had also heard the same words. At that time, she was still as rigid as when she was in the palace. Every day, she had the thought of living and dying on her own. At that time, there was a rumor in the palace that the prime minister intended to marry his youngest daughter to the 8th prince, Xianli, as a consort. When she heard this news, she felt that her already gloomy life had lost even more light. Unexpectedly, she fell seriously ill. During her illness, Xianli came to visit her. He leaned close to her ear and softly said, "What do you think? Do you wish for me to take in someone else?" Jiang Ruan absent-mindedly thought about how she had answered at that time. She was bewildered and miserable. Enduring the pain in her heart, she said, "This is your Highness's matter. I have no right to ask." Then, what did Xianli say? Xianli looked at her and said in a gentle tone, "In this life, the position of princess is reserved for you. No one else can enter my eyes, let alone my heart. If you hear anything, then it is merely a play, it cannot be done for real. In my heart, there is only you. Do you still not understand?" Such sincere and affectionate words finally shattered the last bit of weakness she had in the palace. For the sake of his deep affection, she had advanced step by step in the palace and was willing to be a chess piece for him. In the end, she had lost so badly that not even her bones remained. Now that he had suddenly heard these words, it was as if time had flowed backward. It unexpectedly brought her back to the day when Xianli had softly whispered into her ear in his previous life. Truly, each word was filled with tears of blood, every needle piercing to the bone. Xiao Xiao saw her abnormality and was startled in his heart. Xiao Xiao had seen Jiang Ruan in all kinds of ways. She was gentle and graceful, obedient and docile, bright and charming, ruthless and heartless, clenching her teeth and stubbornly independent. However, he had rarely seen her at a loss. At this moment, she was holding the warm stove and sitting opposite him. Her eyes were absent-minded. He did not know what she was thinking about. Her gaze was full of mournfulness and blankness, which made one's heart tighten for no reason. Xiao Xiao did not have time to analyze why Jiang Ruan's mood had suddenly changed. He immediately stood up and pulled her up. As soon as he held her hand, he felt that her whole body was trembling slightly. He paused for a moment, then pulled Jiang Ruan into his embrace. "Sorry, I was wrong. I should not have asked you like this." There was a trace of annoyance in his tone. "I will not accept anyone else. The female master here is only you." When her body touched Xiao Xiao's ice-cold clothes, Jiang Ruan was at a loss for a moment. Her head rested on Xiao Xiao's chest. Xiao Xiao's arms wrapped around her shoulders and gently rested on her back. He carefully comforted her. His posture was somewhat like coaxing a child. Jiang Ruan stiffly reached out and hugged him back. Her hands slowly tightened around his waist, and her eyes gradually regained their calm. She thought that she had forgotten all those things and that she could hide the hatred in her heart. However, it was not so easy to let go of the things in this world. Xian Li's betrayal and hurt in her previous life had always been there, and she had never forgotten it for a single day. Xiao Xiao felt Jiang Ruan's agitation. He did not know what he had said wrong to cause Jiang Ruan to be so abnormal, but he knew that the problem must have been in the words he had just said. After thinking for a while, he said softly, "I said that you do not need to do anything. You do not need to worry about this matter. I am not willing." Jiang Ruan suddenly opened her mouth. Xiao Xiao looked down at her. Jiang Ruan's expression seemed to still be in a trance, but her eyes were as calm as before. Her hands were ice-cold, and she tightened her grip around Xiao Xiao's waist. She smiled slightly, "I am not willing for you to accept other people." The young girl's smile was like a flower. She was born bright and beautiful, and every time they met, she seemed to grow up a little. Now, the childishness had completely disappeared, and between her brows was a flirtatious charm. Every movement of hers had a kind of breathtaking beauty that was engraved into one's bones. Her tone was firm and calm. "Since you want me to enter your Wang Fu and you, both belong to me. All women in the world are prone to jealousy, and I am no exception. If more women come to divide up my things, I will not hesitate to kill them, even if it is just for show." As she finished speaking, her tone revealed a murderous intent. In fact, Jiang Ruan herself could not explain why she had said these words. After she had been reborn, she had also thought about her own marriage. It was nothing more than to use the power of her husband's family to achieve her own goals. Since it was only a tool for revenge, she would not care about whether it was sincere or fake. She would even play the role of a virtuous wife. If there was a need, she could take the initiative to take a concubine for her husband. But now, she had spoken her own thoughts. Time overlapped with her previous life, and she did not know whether she was answering Xiao Xiao's question or the previous Xian Li's question. But in her heart, she was clear that at this time, she had spoken without thinking. This was her original intention. Xiao Xiao stared at her. Ripples seemed to flash in his calm, pitch-black eyes, but they quickly disappeared. The next moment, he quickly bent his head and kissed Jiang Ruan's forehead. He pressed Jiang Ruan's head into his embrace, and his tone was unexpectedly gentle. "I don't like to play, so there will be no one else." Jiang Ruan's body trembled. He said he didn't like to play. He and Xian Li were, after all, different people. Jiang Ruan sighed in her heart and unconsciously hugged Xiao Xiao a little tighter. He was not Xian Li. The two of them had never been similar in any way. Xiao Xiao hugged her, his long eyelashes drooping to hide the emotions in his eyes. Jiang Ruan was so strange today, and he did not know where she had gone wrong. In the past, he had thought that there were some secrets that Jiang Ruan did not want others to touch, and he had not deliberately probed. Now it seemed that if some secrets were not unraveled, there would always be an invisible barrier between the two of them. The news of Prince of Jining, Xiao Xiao, and Jiang Xing's early return to the capital spread throughout the capital on the second day. The first was to bestow an immediate marriage between Prince of Jining, Xiao Xiao, and Hong and Junzhu, Jiang Ruan. The second was to confer Jiang Xing the title of Great General of Lucy, a second-rank official rank, and to take over the 100,000 troops that had been under General Wu. For a young and rising star of the court who had been born as a civil official, this was already a great honor. With this position as a starting point, Jiang Xing's future was bound to be splendid and splendid. However, this time, the genie guards led by Xiao Xiao and Jiang Xing had indeed fought a beautiful battle. Guanliang Han was still on the road with the army and the envoy of Tianjin. When the envoy entered the capital, he would write a letter of surrender. From then on, Jin would pay tribute every year, cede 10 cities, and bow to the great Jin dynasty. With regards to this result, the emperor was very satisfied. That day, Xiao Xiao entered the imperial study and spoke with the emperor for a full hour. No one knew what he said, but after Xiao Xiao left, the eunuch who had entered the imperial study to clean up saw that the floor was littered with broken teacups and porcelain shards. It was obvious that the emperor was very angry. But for some reason, the news of Xiao Xiao and Jiang Ruan's immediate marriage spread the next day. Everyone guessed that the conversation between Xiao Xiao and the emperor had something to do with this matter, and they could not help but feel envious of Jiang Ruan. The marriage was set for a month later. At that time, Guanliang Han would also return to the capital, and it would coincide with the end of the year. It could be said to be a double blessing. This heaven-sent marriage had been set long ago, and now, it was just the completion of the marriage. However, it still caused quite a stir in the palace, and for a while, discussions about this matter could be heard everywhere. In the imperial garden, Jiang Zhaoi and a few palace womenfolk were sitting on a small table discussing this matter. Jiang Dan casually peeled a honey orange. Her hand, which was covered with nail polish, appeared very white and tender on the plump honey orange. She smiled and said, "De Jiejie really has a good life." Beauty Wang, who should now be called Wang Zhaorong, said gently, "Hong and Junzhu has always been intelligent and appropriate. She and that Jining Wang are a match made in heaven." With the marriage bestowed by the empress, it can be said to be perfect. Jiang Dan smiled and glanced at Wang Lian then at Mu Shiro. Over the past year, for some reason, the emperor had also raised her and Wang Lian and Mu Shiro at the same time. Perhaps he felt that the three of them could restrain each other. Wang Lian had become Wang Zhaorong, Mu Shiro had become Mu Zhaohua, and she herself had become Jiang Zhaoi. The three of them were all third grade, and there was no difference in rank between them. Mu Shiro was always cold and aloof, so for the time being, there was no need to fear her. This Wang Lian, on the other hand, was very cunning. In the palace, the two of them fought fiercely in secret. Jiang Dan smiled and suddenly said to a woman sitting below, Dong Shiro, you and my Dejie used to be good friends. I wonder what gift you have prepared for Dejie's wedding this time. The woman raised her head and revealed a beautiful face. It was Dong Yinger without a doubt. Her appearance had not changed, but her expression was no longer as lively as when she was a young girl. In the past year, she had also received the emperor's favor and was promoted to a third-grade commoner. The ways of the world were really ironic. When she was a young girl, she was the first daughter of the capital governor's residence while Jiang Dan was only a concubine daughter of a minister's residence. In terms of status, Jiang Dan could not compare to her. Now that she had entered the palace, she had to bow when she saw Jiang Dan. At this moment, when Dong Yinger heard Jiang Dan's sarcastic words, she only smiled faintly. A princess is of noble birth, how can this concubine compare? Dong Shiro Yi's words are wrong. I remember that you and my Dejie were very close. That's right, isn't there also that young lady of the Zhao clan? Speaking of which, I remembered something. Big Brother has been promoted to a great general, and this reward is also very clever. When the news of Big Brother's head being separated from his body was spread, who would have thought that he would have such a glorious day? That's why I said that man proposes but God disposes. Big Brother's opportunity made those people with bad intentions fall into a disadvantageous position. When Big Brother was in trouble, how many people who wanted to be in-laws with him saw the wind and immediately drew a clear line with him? Most likely now their intestines are green with regret. Dong Yinger's body stiffened slightly and she lowered her head. Her throat unconsciously tightened. Jiang Dan's words seemed to be directed at her. At that time, when Jiang Xing's whereabouts were unknown, her own parents saw that the situation was not right and forced her to enter the palace. At that time, she had no way out and seeing that Jiang Xing was in danger, she lost hope and entered the palace. Who knew that there would be such a day? When the news of Jiang Xing being rescued came out, her heart was really happy and sad. Happy that that person was still alive. Sad that she was already someone else's wife and there was no longer any possibility between the two of them. Now that Jiang Xing had become the young great general of Lucy and was in the limelight, she was just a member of the palace's household. How ironic was it when these words came out from Jiang Dan's mouth. Seeing this, Wang Lian smiled slightly and said, is it not so? Great General Jiang is really young and promising. His achievements are outstanding and he is also a talented person. I do not know which family's daughter will benefit in the future to be able to gain his favor. How can it be in the future? Jiang Dan's smile became more cheerful, isn't it a little interesting now? Dong Yinger's body stiffened. Wang Lian was surprised and asked, what does younger sister mean? Dong Xiuyi, do you still remember the young lady of the Zhao family who was very close to eldest sister? Jiang Dan said with a smile, at that time, the three of you were very close. I heard that great General Zhang's sweetheart was the young lady of the Zhao family. Now I have already sent people to the Zhao residence to inquire about it. Speaking of it, it is really a very compatible marriage. I think that my eldest sister will be very happy. Dong Yinger's face was already pale. If she did not remember that this was the imperial garden, she would have almost collapsed. Zhao Jin. It was actually Zhao Jin. She had been in the palace for a long time and had long seen that Jiang Dan was not a good character. Originally, she wanted to treat these words as Jiang Dan's baseless accusations, but as long as Jiang Xing was involved, she could not help but be confused. Jiang Xing's sweetheart was actually Zhao Jin. When did they get together? When did Zhao Jin enter Jiang Xing's eyes? Dong Yinger only felt her heart turn cold. At that time, she did not hide the fact that she liked Jiang Xing from Zhao Jin. Zhao Jin knew that her heart was still with Jiang Xing. And Jiang Ruan, who had treated her so coldly, was helping Zhao Jin and Jiang Xing. They were both friends, why did Jiang Ruan treat her so differently? Deep unwillingness and anger welled up in her heart, as well as the sadness of being betrayed. She only felt that everyone was watching her as a joke. It was as if she did not belong to herself. She could not even hear what Jiang Dan was saying. The young lady of the Zhao family and eldest brother are very compatible. Jiang Dan said with a smile, eldest brother is a general, and the young lady of the Zhao family is from a military family. No matter how you look at it, they are very suitable. No wonder eldest sister also wants to help them. Jiang Dan spoke happily, but she did not expect that someone would come up behind her. Just as she finished speaking, she heard a clear voice behind her. This prince originally thought that only ignorant women in the marketplace would gossip about others. I did not expect that the nobles deep in the palace would also do the same. This is really an eye-opener. Fortunately, the young lady of the Zhao family and General Jiang are not here today. Otherwise, if they heard that their reputation has been destroyed for no reason, they would not let it go. Grand Tutor Lu, am I right? Everyone was startled. Jiang Dan stood up and saw a young man and a beautiful youth behind her. The youth was young and handsome, and his tone was smiling and teasing. However, there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. Who else could it be but Xian Pei? Your 13th Highness. Wang Lian, and the others hurriedly stood up to pay their respects. For a prince, even a third-rank palace concubine had to bow. Moreover, this 13th prince was so favored by the emperor that even the crown prince's grand tutor, Lu Min, was given to him. The young man beside him had delicate features and a faint arrogance. At this moment, a trace of anger flashed in his eyes, but he did not bat an eyelid as he said, Your Highness is right. This was agreement. Jiang Dan secretly gritted her teeth. She did not know when Xian Pei had appeared. She felt that she had lost face in front of everyone because of Xian Pei. She immediately smiled and said, Your 13th Highness, these matters of gossip in the harem are merely women's matters. If your 13th Highness interferes, you will become a laughing stock. She did not know why, but she did not like this Xian Pei very much. She could deal with other princes with ease and was not stingy with her compliments. However, when it came to this 13th prince, even her expression was very forced. She did not know if it was an illusion, but she could always see Jiang Ruan's shadow in Xian Pei. Especially that pair of eyes that were as calm as an ancient well. When he looked at people, it was the same coldness that made people's hearts palpitate. Wang Lian secretly scolded the idiot in her heart. Everyone knew that the emperor valued Xian Pei, but he still spoke so rudely to Jiang Dan. He did not even think about what the emperor would think if these words were to reach his ears. The emperor himself could scold Xian Pei, but he would never let a Zhaoi teach a prince a lesson. How can this be considered as matters of the harem? Xian Pei smiled slightly. General Jiang is a meritorious minister of the great Jin dynasty. Zhaoi lives in the palace, but she is also clear about General Jiang's private affairs. Presumably, she is also very concerned about General Jiang. Zhaoi is a woman in the harem, yet she is concerned about General Jiang. As a prince of the great Jin dynasty and the son of my imperial father, this prince should also be concerned about General Jiang. Jiang Dan was speechless. She secretly scolded Xian Pei for being so cunning. These words were really quite offensive. As a woman in the harem, it was really overstepping her boundaries to pay attention to the private affairs of a young general. Jiang Dan said with difficulty, In any case, he is my eldest brother. Zhaoi is really strange. The one who spoke was Mu Shiro, who had been watching coldly from the side. She was born beautiful, but she was too arrogant. At this moment, she said coldly, I heard that General Jiang entered the palace to receive a reward, but I have never heard of him entering the palace to reminisce with Zhaoi. No one from the Jiang family has come to visit Zhaoi. I really don't know where Zhaoi got this information from. The Empress Dowager and His Majesty have not said anything. It seems that Jiang Zhaoi is more capable than His Majesty. No one had thought that the usually cold beauty, Mu Shiro, would be so powerful when she spoke. She almost made Jiang Dan speechless. The palace was filled with the emperor's people. What was said here today might reach the emperor's ears. No one knew what the emperor was thinking. Jiang Dan panicked and said, I did not say that. Mu Xiaohua, why are you talking about me like that? Mu Shiro laughed coldly and did not speak. Xian Pei, who was standing to the side, laughed. Lu Min, who was standing next to him, also smiled, a trace of a smile flashing through her eyes. Jiang Dan had unintentionally offended Xian Pei and isolated herself. No one would offend a prince that the emperor thought highly of. No one spoke up for Jiang Dan. Jiang Dan's current situation was very difficult. Xian Pei smoothed his sleeves. The youth with delicate features was dressed in gorgeous and exquisite clothing. There was a gentle smile at the corner of his lips, but his tone was undisguised indifference. Jiang Jiaoyi, illness comes from the mouth, and disaster comes from the mouth. You must remember this. In that instant, Jiang Dan felt a wave of coldness. Chapter 185. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, it was the day that Guan Lianghan led his troops back to the court. The defeated Tianjin sent an envoy to deliver a letter of surrender. The emperor was greatly pleased, and Guan Lianghan received many rewards. But now, people did not pay attention to this, and instead focused on Jiang Ruan's marriage. On the 5th day after Guan Lianghan returned to the court, it was the wedding day of Jinying Wang and Hong and Junzhu. Because Hong and Junzhu was now considered half a member of the imperial family, it was handled by the Empress Dowager. The official's real family, the minister's Fu, did not make any moves. Na Kai, ask for the name, Na Ji, ask for the date. On this day, it was snowing lightly in the river east, and snowflakes sprinkled down. Jiang Wan sat in the inner room, and the Zhao family's second grandmother, Ao Shi, sat in front of her, watching the matron of honor give her a multicolored cotton thread to make dough. Second grandmother Zhao had always been grateful to Jiang Wan for saving Zhao Feizhou. Speaking of which, the women of the General Fu were all very gentle and kind. Knowing that she was Zhao Mei's daughter, they had continuously sent her gifts over the years. Now that she was married, the minister's Fu was deserted, and Jiang Quan simply did not care. Xia Yu was a member of the Xia family. On the surface, she had done her best, but in reality, she was not particularly warm. On the other hand, the Zhao family had sent a total of 20 congratulatory gifts. Zhao Guang had also sent over 10,000 taels of banknotes and land deeds. He said that it was the dowry that Zhao Mei had not sent out when she married into the minister's Fu, and now it was all given to Jiang Wan. How could she refuse? The Zhao family treated her with absolute sincerity. Yao Shi looked at her as she talked about how to get along with married husband and wife, which really made Jiang Wan blush with shame. With great difficulty, Yao Shi went out. Lin Zixiang ate the fruit on the table with the red letter and said, "You probably didn't listen to a word that your aunt said. To be honest, I am a little curious, how will you and Xiao Xiao get along after you become husband and wife?" TSK, I can't think of anything. When Fei Fei face-bombed, "What nonsense are you talking about? You are not married yet, so you will naturally know after you are married. Ruan Mimi, your temperament is so gentle and you are born beautiful. Moreover, there is no mother-in-law or younger aunt in Jinying Wang Fu, so your days will only get better and better." Ever since when Fei Fei had nearly fainted at the Jiang Fu's entrance, she had discovered that she was pregnant upon returning to the Fu. Originally, her life in the mansion was not very smooth. Once she got pregnant, she was almost worshipped by her husband's family. Now, she could be considered to have some experience in the inner courtyard. Seeing that Jiang Wan did not need to serve her mother-in-law and youngest aunt, she was naturally happy for her. What does this have to do with beauty? Lin Zixiang immediately said, "Can't I get married if I'm not beautiful?" Where did this twisted logic come from? Those who only care about their outer appearance are short-sighted people. Lin Zixiang had always been a loner. When Fei Fei could not win an argument against her and could only helplessly shake her head, Zhao Jin smiled and tried to smooth things over. What's the point of saying this? Today is Ruan Mimi's big day, so I'd better take out the dowry first. Ruan Mimi has seen many good things, so don't think I'm too shabby. As she spoke, she took out a small box from her sleeve. The box looked dark and swarthy, and there was nothing special about it. In fact, it even looked a little stupid. When Jiang Ruan took it, Zhao Jin spat out a mouthful of tea and said, "What is this thing that you're giving? A stone? In any case, you should have found a better-looking box." "What stone?" Hearing this, Zhao Jin anxiously said, "This is the dark black stone that my eldest brother brought back from Shirong. It looks a little stupid, but when it comes to sturdiness, no one can compare. If you take it and burn it in a fire for 3 days and 3 nights, there won't be any damage. It's a treasure that's hard to find even with 1,000 taels of gold." Giving such a stone as a dowry was really in line with Zhao Jin's temperament. However, Jiang Ruan felt helpless in her heart. What was the use of holding such a box? She could not possibly use such a box to store jewelry. "Open it and take a look. The thing inside was personally made by me at Bao Yu Lu." Zhao Jin's face was full of anticipation. Jiang Ruan opened the box according to her words and discovered that there was a ring inside. For the time being, it could be called a ring, but to be more precise, it was a black ring with a gold lump on top. On the other hand, no matter how calm Jiang Ruan usually was, when she saw such an intuitive piece of jewelry, she could not help but choke. When Wen Fei Fei and Lin Zixiang saw it, they both coughed. They really did not agree with Zhao Jin's taste in choosing jewelry. Normally, it was fine if her sisters looked at her, but if she completely followed her heart's desire, it would not be pleasing to her eyes. For example, the pile of gold beads on the ring made everyone feel somewhat powerless. Even if Jiang Ruan wanted to owe her a favor, this kind of jewelry was really eye-catching. Jiang Ruan smiled slightly, "Thank you." "You're welcome." Zhao Jin smiled and said, "This ring is also made of black gold stone and is very sturdy. In the future, if you encounter any situation, you can probably use it as a knife. But after thinking about it, you are still a girl after all. You can't just wear a plain ring, so I asked Bao Yu Lu's master to add some decorations." The 8 people who were carrying the sedan were all dressed in green and were tall and handsome. Their entire bodies were very imposing, and they appeared very imposing. They had never seen a manservant carrying a sedan before, so they attracted the attention of the womenfolk. However, among the crowd, there were young girls who blushed when they saw the sedan bearers. Jiang Quan stood to one side, and in the midst of the bustle, there was a smile on his face, as if he was also very happy. However, upon closer inspection, one could see that the smile was forced. Following this was the weeping sedan. Originally, the bride should have sat on her mother's lap, and her mother should have fed her sedan rice. However, Zhao Mei had already passed away many years ago. If Xia Yu were to be the one to feed the sedan rice, in the eyes of the crowd, it would be a huge mockery. Naturally, Xiao Xiao would not allow such a thing to happen. He had already discussed this with the people of the General Fu. The sedan rice would be personally fed by the general's wife, Madame Li. Madame Li was Jiang Ruan's maternal grandmother. Jiang Ruan was sitting on her lap. Madame Li had just scooped a spoonful of rice and brought it to Jiang Ruan's mouth when her eyes immediately reddened. At that time, Zhao Mei and Jiang Quan could be considered to have eloped to become wives. However, when her only daughter got married, she was not able to feed her even a mouthful of sedan rice. This was the eternal regret and pain in Madame Li's heart. Now, as she watched her own granddaughter ascend the bridal sedan, it was as if she was once again looking at her bright and enthusiastic youngest daughter. Madame Li's heart ached, and her words of exhortation were even more sincere. "Nan ah nan, Nong can carry it, ah, it's so warm ah. Nong go alone ah, ah, bring a wave ah." After the weeping sedan was the carrying sedan. The bride's elder brother would carry the bride into the sedan. Today, Jiang Xing was dressed in a lotus green embroidered auspicious robe with a multicolored ribbon tied around his waist. This had been given to him by Jiang Ruan when she had been bored. He walked to Jiang Ruan's side, bent down, and picked her up. He moved closer to her ear and whispered, Ruan, are you ready? I'm ready, eldest brother. Under the wedding veil, Jiang Ruan smiled slightly. She only felt Jiang Xing's arm, which was holding her, tighten, as if some kind of emotion was about to burst forth. However, in the end, he only said, Ruan, from now on, you are someone else's. If he bullies you, you tell me. Never let yourself suffer any grievances. His words were heavy and forbearing, not like an elder brother marrying off a younger sister, but more like a father marrying off a daughter. Jiang Ruan wanted to laugh, so she stretched out her hands and hugged his neck tightly. However, she recalled the grievous news of Jiang Xing's previous life, and the mournfulness and despair in her heart at that time. In this life, she had always protected Jiang Xing. Jiang Xing was still by her side, and that was enough. She smiled and said, I know, eldest brother. No matter who I marry, you will always be my eldest brother. Jiang Xing did not speak again, and carried Jiang Ruan towards the bridal sedan. He had watched the young girl in his arms grow up, from a babe learning to speak to the slender and elegant young lady today. Even if she was about to become someone's wife, in Jiang Xing's heart, Jiang Ruan would always be a little sister who had not grown up. After Jiang Ruan sat in the sedan, the person at the front of the wedding procession appeared in front of everyone. Xiao Xiao sat on a white horse. It was probably his precious steed, as there was not a single strand of hair out of place on its entire body. It was glossy and smooth, and even standing there, it gave off a sense of pride. He held the reins in his hand, and his wedding attire was new. It was really very eye-catching, and almost immediately, he attracted everyone's attention. Xiao Xiao was a person who kept a low profile. Normally, he did not often appear in front of people, and he had always liked to wear black. They had never seen him wear such a gorgeous color. Now that he was wearing a bright red wedding attire, even if his thin lips were tightly pursed and his expression was indifferent, he actually revealed a little bit of exquisite charm. His appearance was outstanding. At this moment, he was sitting high on the horse, and his eyes were lowered towards the door of the sedan. His eyes were like dots of paint, and his eyebrows were like an ink painting. Unexpectedly, he did not have the romantic elegance of a mortal. This beauty was really shocking, and it caused people to stare blankly. When Madame Li saw his appearance, although her eyes were filled with tears, she was also sincerely happy. She had long heard of Jinying Wang's cold and cheerless temperament. Originally, she had been worried that Jiang Ruan would be wronged after marrying him, but now it seemed that she had thought too much. Xiao Xiao's appearance was not completely heartless. She was someone who had been through it, and there were some things that she could see clearly. Xiao Xiao's appearance was outstanding, and his family background was also there. For a moment, Madame Li was very satisfied with this grandson-in-law of hers. Jean Eyre, who was distributing wedding candies among the crowd, shook his head and said, the 4 leaders of the genie guards have all become sedan bearers. The young master really values women too much. When Steward Lin heard him say this, he immediately gave him a kick without a trace of politeness. What are you saying? The sedan bearers represent the face of Jinying Wang's Fu. How can it be like other Fu, where you can just randomly find a few people? Look at the people we find to carry the sedan, their pace is also uniform. With one look, you can tell that they are martial artists. Young Furin is also very comfortable inside. Her face is also good, and just looking at her makes people like her. If you say this, I am afraid that you are jealous of others, and that they did not let you carry the sedan bearers. Thank you, old Lin, Jean Eyre smiled, it's all because I am too ugly, and I really can't represent the face of our Fu. I am very ashamed. Oh, you're quite self-aware. Lu Zhu was busy distributing the naked silver, and when she heard Jean Eyre's words, she was delighted. Indeed, self-awareness is important. That's still better looking than you. Jean Eyre grinned as he replied. What's there to argue about? Steward Lin shook his head, it doesn't matter who it is. In short, everyone is here today to serve as a foil to young master's beauty. Young master is born so good, if Furin and master's spirits in heaven were to see you, they would be very happy. Those were all sacrifices that served as a foil to Xiao Xiao's beauty. Everyone was completely unaware that in the eyes of this old steward of Jinying Wang's Fu, they were the same as the surrounding flower vases and paperweights. Jiang Xing followed the sedan bearers. The sedan bearers circled around Thousand Year Lane and San Fa Qing, taking the meaning of Thousand Year and Three Hair. Along the way, the people of Jinying Wang's Fu also displayed their rich and overbearing side. As they walked, they scattered silver, attracting everyone to snatch it. The saying, 10 li of red makeup, was not false. Even when a princess was getting married, there would not be such a grand scene. The people of Jinying Wang's Fu were born to be upright and handsome, and with Steward Lin's arrangements, they were a feast for the eyes. In addition, they were generous. Almost everyone in the capital turned out to see the wedding. The women all came to see the men of Jinying Wang's Fu, and the men all came to see the silver of Jinying Wang's Fu. The hearts of unmarried young ladies shattered all over the ground could be used to build a capital. Even though Jiang Ruan was in the bridal sedan, she still felt the countless envious gazes piercing her back. After this day, there was a saying in the great Jin dynasty, rather be a servant of the Xiao family than an official's daughter. She would rather be a servant of the Xiao family. Every day, she would probably see more beauties and silver than the beauties and silver of an official's daughter. Jiang Ruan did not know what the situation was like outside, but she could tell from the noise that it was certainly very ostentatious. This kind of ostentatious action did not seem to be Xiao Xiao's doing. Presumably, it was Steward Lin's arrangement. Steward Lin had been preparing for the marriage for an entire year, and he had done everything in detail. Now that the opportunity to display his skills had finally arrived, he would not let go of this opportunity. Jiang Ruan was truly puzzled. How did Xiao Xiao, who had such a low-key temperament, raise such an ostentatious steward like Steward Lin? At this moment, she was sitting in the middle of the sedan bearers. The sedan bearers moved very steadily, almost to the point that one could not feel them moving. Inside, there was even a small table, and the box was filled with some exquisite pastries to prevent her from starving on the journey. She smiled faintly. In her previous life, when she entered the palace, she had become the emperor's woman. Thus, she had lost the opportunity to wear a bright red wedding dress. Now that this experience was unfamiliar and novel, it could not be considered too bad. After welcoming the bride for an entire week in the capital, the sedan bearers finally arrived at Jinying Wangfu. There was already a large wave of people waiting at the door. Xiao Xiao did not have any relatives, and Jinying Wangfu did not have any other clans. The people who had come were all Xiao Xiao's own friends. Most likely, they were Xiao Xiao's martial brothers from the same sect and some officials of the court. The embroidered uniform guards were neatly organized, and it actually looked very lively. Guan Lianghan lifted the corner of his robe and began to release firecrackers and play music to welcome the sedan bearers. Stopping at the back of the sedan bearers to unload the sedan bearers, a 5- or 6-year-old maid stepped out to welcome the bride out of the sedan bearers. Jiang Ruan went out, and with the help of the maid of honor, she stepped over the saddle of the horse and walked on the red carpet. The maid of honor supported the bride to the right side of the wedding hall. The people in the wedding hall had already stood to one side to greet the bride in the temple. Jiang Ruan and Xiao Xiao stood to one side, holding incense sticks and candles in their hands as they began to light the incense. Zhao Guang and Madame Li sat on the high seats, their gazes somewhat moved. However, Jiang Quan and Xia Yu's expressions were somewhat stiff. Most likely, they were trying their best to appear moved, but they appeared especially stiff. If it had been anyone else in the crowd, it would have been fine. However, as Jiang Xing was looking, his gaze fell on one person in the crowd. Today, the handsome youth was only wearing a moon-white long velvet brocade robe, with a snow wolf fur cloak draped over his head. His entire person was as handsome as jade, as if he was a young master carved from jade in some family's manner. That person was Xian Pei. Beside Xian Pei stood Lu Min, but he did not know why these two people had come. The invitations that Steward Lin had personally made were all made of gold. Naturally, it was not a small sum of money, so they were all recorded in the book and were extremely precious. Jiang Xing had also seen them before, but he did not remember these two people. In fact, when Steward Lin had drafted the list of guests, he had invited Lu Min, but in the end, he did not know why he had crossed them out. He also did not know why Lu Min and Xian Pei had come uninvited. Previously, Jiang Xing had heard people say that he seemed to have some feelings for Jiang Yuan, but what was up with Xian Pei? A prince had actually come out of the palace to pay his respects to Jiang Yuan. He frowned and asked Steward Lin, "Why has 13th prince come?" "How would I know?" Steward Lin stroked his beard. "It is probably because of young master's face. Speaking of which, this 13th prince is really generous, actually gifting young madam 66 shops of He Han Fang. Even the Jiang family cannot compare to this generosity." He Han Fang was a food and restaurant business, and there were shops all over the Great Jin dynasty. With just one shop, it was a guaranteed profit, not to mention 66 shops. Every year, there would be countless customers, and they would not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of their lives. Not to mention how a prince like Xian Pei would have the ability to obtain so many shops, even Xian Li might not have the ability to do so. What was even more shocking was that he had handed over this monstrous wealth. Jiang Xing's frown deepened. "Those shops all have our Ruan's name written on them?" Steward Lin clapped his hands. "Now that you mention it, it is indeed written under young madam's name. This is a little strange. If it was for good relations with young master, there was no need to write young madam's name." While the two were talking, Jiang Yuan and Xiao Xiao had already completed the 3 kneeling and 9 kowtows, the 6 ascending bows, and finally, the husband and wife bowing to each other. Xiao Xiao turned around, and Jiang Yuan also turned sideways. The two of them faced each other. Jiang Yuan could not see anything with the veil covering her head, and her movements were somewhat hesitant. Suddenly, she felt her hand being held. She did not know when, but Xiao Xiao had already grasped her hand. His hand was slender and cold, but it contained some kind of reassuring strength as it steadily supported her. Husband and wife bowing to each other, the announcer sang loudly. The two of them bowed together. Jiang Yuan could only see her crimson skirt through the veil. She could not describe the feeling in her heart. This seemed to be a farewell, but also seemed to be a new beginning. No matter what, the person in front of her was the person who would live with her in the future. No matter what happened, he would always be by her side. Chapter 186. After the ceremony of bowing to the heaven and earth was completed, 2 fair-skinned and jade-carved girls, holding the dragon and phoenix candles in their hands, led Jiang Yuan into the bridal chamber. Although Jiang Yuan had lived a lifetime, it was her first time getting married. This complicated arrangement almost made her flustered. When Jiang Yuan and Xiao Xiao were escorted to the left and right sides respectively, the people quietly retreated. Jiang Yuan felt slightly uneasy, but it was not good to remove the veil covering her head. She thought for a while and said, "You should go out quickly, the wedding banquet is waiting for you." After saying this, she heard a light laugh from inside the room. It seemed to be Xiao Xiao's laugh. Then Jiang Yuan felt her palm being held, and Xiao Xiao's voice came from beside her ear, "Don't be nervous." "I'm not nervous." Jiang Yuan interrupted him. Her tone was slightly hurried, as if she was annoyed that something in her heart had been exposed. "Go out quickly." Xiao Xiao straightened up, ordered Lian Xiao and the others to serve Jiang Yuan well, and then walked out unhurriedly. After Xiao Xiao left, Jiang Yuan took off the veil, startling Bai Ji so much that she immediately wanted to cover her face again. "Miss, quickly cover yourself properly. What will happen if someone sees you later? It's just a wedding, why do you need to be so cautious?" Jiang Yuan was helpless. The red tape of getting married was enough to drive people crazy. But she did not know if it was housekeeper Lin's doing. She had probably heard that the princess's marriages in the palace did not have so many tricks. Today's wedding was indeed grand and solemn, but it was really too much for people to bear. Lian Xiao felt sorry for Jiang Ruan, so she echoed, no one is watching right now. Why don't we wait for someone to come and then put the veil on? If not for the fact that this hair is not easy to untie, it would be better to remove it together with the phoenix coronet. That phoenix coronet is so heavy, I feel tired for Mississippi. The world is big, the most important thing is to be comfortable. Lu Zhu took out some small snacks from a box. Miss has not eaten anything until now, and we still have to wait outside for a few hours. It is not good to be hungry. Early this morning, this servant went to Fei Chui Zhai to buy these. They are exquisitely made and will not stain your mouth. Miss, eat some to fill your stomach. Since she had woken up early in the morning, apart from eating some wedding fruits, she had not taken in a single drop of water. It would have been better if she had not mentioned the dewdrops, but now that she had mentioned them, Jiang Ruan really felt a little hungry. The pastries were small and delicate, so Jiang Ruan picked up a few and ate them. Baiji poured a cup of tea and handed it over. Moisten your mouth. Going back and forth, by the time Jiang Ruan had finished the packet of pastries, she actually felt a little tired. Seeing her expression, Tianzhu said, if you're tired, you can take a rest first. Young master should come in after a while. When they come in, we will wake Miss up. Jiang Ruan thought for a moment and then did as she was told. She found a position in which the phoenix coronet would not be damaged and rested on the bed. At the banquet outside, the Zhao family and the people of Jining Wangfu were so happy that they didn't know what to say. Although Jiang Quan was Jiang Ruan's father, he and Xia Yu were the only ones left in the Jiang family. At first glance, it looked extremely cold and cheerless. It was as if wherever he sat, there would be a state of decay. In addition, everyone knew that his relationship with Jiang Ruan and Jiang Ruan was not very good. Most of the people who had come today were on good terms with the Zhao family and Jining Wangfu. Naturally, they kept a respectful distance from him. In this way, Jiang Quan was isolated. Jiang Xing had drunk a little too much. Today was Jiang Ruan's big day. As Jiang Ruan's closest relative, he was like an elder brother and also like a father. Together with Xiao Xiao's fellow apprentices, he toasted them one by one. His words were humble and somewhat unyielding. It was most likely that he had entrusted someone to take care of Jiang Ruan, but also that he was supporting Jiang Ruan from behind. The three Zhao brothers of the Zhao family also shared a common hatred for a common enemy with Jiang Xing. Although Jiang Ruan did not have much contact with the Zhao family, she had helped Zhao Yi and Zhao Feizhou several times before. In addition, with Zhao Guang's request, the Zhao family was also Jiang Ruan's backing. Dressed in red, Xiao Xiao stood among the guests and toasted them. His expression was indifferent and cold, as if he was no different from his usual self. However, today, perhaps because of the big day, he was a little cheerful, for his eyes actually became much gentler. The exchange of toasts was very eye-catching. After Jiang Xing had toasted one round, he finally could not help but walk up to Xian Pei. At this moment, Xian Pei was sitting next to Lu Min. His smile was gentle and respectful, and his appearance was very beautiful. In addition, each and every one of his movements had a kind of quiet elegance. At such a young age, he was already very eye-catching. When he grew up, who knew how radiant he would be? Seeing Jiang Xing walk up to him, Xian Pei looked at him and smiled slightly, saying, General Jiang. When he smiled, his eyes and brows were delicate, making him appear harmless and innocent. However, Jiang Xing felt that this youngster was not a person of the pond. He did not beat around the bush and went straight to the point, saying, Your Highness has come to attend my younger sister's wedding banquet. This humble subject is truly frightened. General Jiang need not belittle yourself. Xian Pei smiled and said, Hong and Junzhu can now be considered as this prince's sibling. Today, she is marrying into Jining Wangfu, this prince naturally has to come to congratulate her. There was indeed nothing wrong with these words, but Xian Pei was a dignified imperial prince. There was no need for him to curry favor with Jiang Ruan to achieve any sort of goal. However, the 66 shops that he had made his move did not seem like something that a half-blooded brother would do. Jiang Xing frowned. This youngster was only pretending to be confused and not telling the truth. Jiang Xing could not get any information out of him, but there was nothing he could do. Xian Pei seemed to see through Jiang Xing's thoughts. He raised the wine cup in his hand and waved it at him, saying, "No matter what, today is her marriage. You and this prince are both sincerely happy for her." Jiang Xing was stunned and raised his eyes to look at the youngster in front of him. In his eyes, Xian Pei was not as simple as he appeared on the surface. However, at this moment the affection in the youngster's eyes was sincere. It was as if his blessings and sincerity came from the bottom of his heart. There was not the slightest trace of acting, and one could not help but believe him. While he was still in a daze, Xian Pei had already raised his wine cup and drained it in one gulp. He raised his lips and smiled at him. The other party was a prince, and he had already made this gesture. If he continued to persist, it would appear that he was in the wrong. Jiang Xing could only raise his cup and drained it in one gulp. In the end, the doubts in his heart had not been resolved. Among the guests, Lu Min's smile was somewhat forced. From the previous upstart of the court to the current emperor's official, Lu Min was young and handsome. He had a bright future ahead of him and was still unmarried. As long as there was a daughter of suitable age in the guests' families, they all looked at him fervently. The corners of Lu Min's mouth revealed a trace of a bitter smile. He shook his head and slowly sipped the wine in his cup. He had never been used to drinking wine. At the moment, because his heart was full of worries, wine was a good thing to use to drown his sorrows. In his mind, he recalled the scene of the newlyweds holding hands and standing in the wedding hall just now. That woman was wearing a crimson wedding dress. Her beauty was overwhelming. Under the veil, what kind of color was hidden? That beauty at that moment could only be seen by the newlywed husband. At that time, he thought that this intelligent woman treated him somewhat differently. But in the end, fate made a fool out of him. He did not even have the time to express his feelings before he lost this qualification forever. There was more than one person who had fallen from grace. Lian Xiao, Bai Ji, and the others also had no reason to stay here any longer. Lu Zhu originally wanted to wake Jiang Ruan up, but Xiao Xiao glanced at her indifferently and Lu Zhu left without saying anything. As soon as Xiao Xiao entered, he saw Jiang Ruan sleeping on the bed. She had a big heart and had long thrown her veil to one side. Most likely, she was afraid of ruining the phoenix coronet, so her sleeping posture was somewhat careful. Her hair was slightly messy. The face lying on the pillow was beautiful beyond compare. When her eyes were closed, her long eyelashes drooped down like a butterfly spreading its wings. She had a delicate nose and rosy lips that were like a smear of color cut from the clouds. Her skin was as clear and lustrous as white snow. The bridal chamber was filled with silver charcoal, and the slight warmth caused her cheeks to flush red. She looked even more gorgeous than when she did not wear rouge. He was used to seeing her eyes, which were always distant and indifferent, but when they were closed, they were gentle and seductive. It was as if she was a demon who had mistakenly entered someone's room, and when she was tired of walking, she conveniently slept on the flower bed. Alluring and beautiful, people could not bear to disturb her. In fact, Xiao Xiao really did not disturb her. He saw that Jiang Ruan was sleeping soundly and that the candles on the side were still burning out. He simply ordered someone to fetch some water and went to wash his body. The servant girls who were guarding outside did not expect Xiao Xiao to ask for water so early. For a moment, they were a little puzzled. However, they could not disobey their master's orders, so they quickly fetched some hot water. Xiao Xiao went around to the back of the screen and changed his clothes. He was still immersed in the huge wooden tub, his eyes drooping as he thought about something. After an unknown amount of time, Jiang Ruan felt that the room seemed to have become a little cooler, and she woke up in a daze. When she woke up, she saw that the servant girls in the room had all left. She was still a little confused, and subconsciously looked behind the screen where the sound had come from. The color of the huge glass screen was natural, and it was carved with a picture of a mandarin duck playing in the water. As the steam rose up, Jiang Ruan looked at it and suddenly felt that something was wrong. Only then did she discover that the picture on the screen had quietly changed. From a rich and joyous mandarin duck playing in the water, it had become a man and a woman. The higher the steam rose, the more intense it became. That kind of movement and posture was so ecstatic that it was easy to understand. Jiang Ruan was not a little girl who did not know how to read the situation. In her previous life, when she had entered the palace, the etiquette instructor had also given them pamphlets. It was just that this screen was made magnificently and majestically. Originally, it was assumed that no one had discovered anything strange about it. Otherwise, with Xiao Xiao's serious temperament, he would definitely not have allowed this kind of thing to be placed here. Of course, Jiang Ruan did not know that this screen was an imported product that the imperial bodyguards had pooled their money to obtain from the Western Hemisphere. This piece of colored glaze was a natural product. It had its own color and composition, and it had been specially carved by a skilled craftsman. Once hot water came to the surface, it would show a special shape. Wealthy families could use this to add some interest. For example, after Fang Yinyu had washed her body, wouldn't she be even more interested when she saw the pattern on this screen? This screen had also gone through Steward Lin's hands. Everyone was very satisfied, expressing the ardent expectations of the brocade guards towards their masters. It was just that these two masters were not aware of this. Jiang Ruan looked at the screen in a daze and did not notice that the person behind the screen had already stood up. With a crash, the next moment, he appeared in front of her. Jiang Ruan stared blankly. It was rare for Xiao Xiao to see her staring at something in a daze. He could not help but follow her gaze, and when he saw it, his expression stiffened. Jiang Ruan reacted, and her face inexplicably turned red. Originally, this was not a big deal. She had always been able to easily control her emotions, but because Xiao Xiao was present, she felt uncomfortable all over, and there seemed to be a trace of embarrassment and annoyance. Her gaze drifted around a few times, but in the end, she could not help but look at Xiao Xiao's expression. Xiao Xiao appeared to be much calmer than her. He just casually placed his outer garment on the screen, covering the charming and gentle scene on it. He had just taken a bath, and at this moment, he was only wearing a snow-white inner garment. His long, jade-like hair was slightly wet, hanging down from his shoulders. Under the light of the lamp, his peerlessly handsome face appeared somewhat gentle. Although he looked cold and indifferent, the back of his ears was slightly red. He walked towards Jiang Ruan. Jiang Ruan could not help but feel nervous. Although she secretly warned herself that nothing would happen, she subconsciously tightened her grip on the mattress under her hands. Xiao Xiao noticed her movements and somewhat helplessly stopped a few steps away from her. He said, "I will sleep on the couch." There was a soft couch in front of the window. As Xiao Xiao spoke, he moved forward to take the quilt. Jiang Ruan glanced at it. It was next to the window, and she was afraid that it would be startled by the wind at night. After thinking for a while, she simply steeled her heart and said, "What do you mean by sleeping on the couch? We still need to put on an act. You can sleep here." She moved inwards a little to make room. Xiao Xiao was startled, and a trace of astonishment flashed through his eyes. He looked at Jiang Ruan and did not speak. Jiang Ruan was secretly annoyed. Why did these words sound like an invitation? She coughed lightly, probably to cover up her awkward expression. She confidently took off her outer garments and glanced at Xiao Xiao. "After a tiring day, don't you feel tired? If you are tired, quickly go to sleep. We still have to enter the palace tomorrow, so I will sleep first." She spoke quickly and nimbly. On the surface, she appeared very calm and composed, but Xiao Xiao could not help but laugh. Normally, he did not laugh often, but when he did, it was like the first melting of ice and snow, and the color of spring's dawn. It was almost dazzling. Jiang Ruan glared at him. "What are you laughing at? Rest assured and sleep." He held back his laughter and said, "I am very tired, and do not want to do anything." Jiang Ruan's face immediately felt extremely hot. The culprit, however, slowly climbed onto the couch. The acacia quilt was in front of her. It was spacious and gorgeous, and there was a thin layer of incense sprinkled on it. None of this could compare to the cool and refreshing smell of the youth in front of her. Xiao Xiao divided the quilt into half for her. His long eyelashes drooped, but they could not conceal the joy in his eyes. Chapter 187. Jiang Ruan could no longer remember how she finally fell asleep that night. I wish all the examinees a successful exam. Since Zhao Mei's death, she had almost never had the experience of sharing a bed with another person. Lying on a spacious bed with someone sleeping next to her should have been a very vigilant thing, but she held the dagger that Xiao Xiao had given her. In the end, she did not place it under her pillow, but kept it in the box. Sharing a bed with another person was not a warm thing for her. For example, in her previous life, Zhao Mei and Jiang Quan shared a bed but had different dreams. She had also hoped that Xianli would become the person who shared a bed with her, but it was this person who had deceived her for the rest of her life. She had been very nervous, but who knew that Xiao Xiao would quickly close his eyes. He slept peacefully and peacefully. Even Jiang Ruan could not help but be surprised. As the head of the brocade guards, she did not believe that Xiao Xiao was such a person without vigilance. But this youth slept so at ease, as if being next to her was the safest position. As she watched, Jiang Ruan herself slowly calmed down. Those complicated emotions slowly returned to tranquility, and there was a peace of mind that she had never felt before. The red candle quietly shed hot tears. Time trickled by. At this moment, the bridal chamber did not have the warmth of a gentle flame. It had nothing to do with romance, but there was a faint warmth. It was as if the deep-rooted hatred and coldness that did not belong to the mortal world had been contaminated by a trace of smoke and fire in this festive red. When the sky brightened and the first faint ray of sunlight shone in, Jiang Ruan opened her eyes. She was surprised that she had slept so soundly the whole night. Subconsciously turning her head, the first thing that came into view was the youth's peerlessly handsome face. Perhaps because she had just woken up, her mood was relatively relaxed. Jiang Ruan did not know why she did not shift her gaze away. Instead, she turned over and propped up her chin with one hand as she carefully sized up the young man in front of her. Xiao Xiao slept peacefully. His sleeping posture was very good. Perhaps it was because of his good upbringing since childhood, even in his dreams, he showed a kind of noble elegance. However, compared to when he had woken up, he was less cold and cheerless. There was a kind of elegant gentleness. Her gaze slid downwards, following Xiao Xiao's long and straight eyelashes, passing over his straight nose, thin lips, exquisite chin, and finally resting on his jade-white collarbone. This person was indeed born with a good appearance. As the sunlight shone on him, it added a gentle layer of light gold to his complexion, making him look as handsome as a deity. Her snow-white inner garment had unknowingly fallen apart, revealing her jade-like porcelain-like skin. It was faintly discernible under her clothes, causing people to be unable to resist the urge to reach out and touch it. Jiang Ruan was somewhat dazed as she stared at it. Her brain seemed to have turned into paste, and she actually reached out to touch it as well. The place that her hand touched was smooth and firm, and the temperature was slightly cool. It was as if it was a fine silk satin, and it was extremely comfortable. "Do you feel okay?" Suddenly, a low and hoarse voice rang in her ears, startling her. She withdrew her hand at lightning speed. Xiao Xiao had woken up at some point. He glanced at her with a smile that was not a smile, sat up, and straightened his collar. Jiang Ruan originally felt a little ashamed, but when she saw his last action, she became a little anxious. Why did it look like she was trying to force herself on a man from a good family? What kind of expression did Xiao Xiao have? Was she that fierce and lustful? Her expression, as if she had swallowed a fly, clearly pleased Xiao Xiao. The corners of Xiao Xiao's mouth rose, and he reached out to pat her head. Perhaps it felt good, as he rubbed it a few times. Then, as if nothing had happened, he said, "Call your servant girl in." "No need." Jiang Ruan sat up on her own. She was also only wearing snow-white inner garment. Regardless of Xiao Xiao's presence, she took out some clothes from the chest and walked behind the screen. In the morning, the screen was an ordinary picture of mandarin ducks playing in the water. Even so, when Jiang Ruan walked past, she looked at the wedding clothes draped over her head, and thought of the embarrassing situation from last night. She could not help but feel short of breath. She did not know why, but she did not call Lian Xiao and the others in. In her heart, she did not want others to see the scene of her interaction with Xiao Xiao the next day. She did not care, but Xiao Xiao was, after all, a man. Nothing had happened on his wedding night, so how could he be too comfortable in front of others? As she thought about this, she changed her clothes. By the time Jiang Ruan walked out of the screen, Xiao Xiao had also changed his clothes. Because it was the second day of the wedding, Xiao Xiao entered the palace to meet the Empress Dowager. It was not good for Xiao Xiao to wear his usual black clothes, so he chose a light red court robe. The embroidered white python bared its fangs and brandished its claws, giving him the air of a noble. Although it was cold and cheerless, it made the young master look even more like a jade, like a pine tree. Jiang Ruan also wore a watery red lantern dress with butterflies. There was a circle of fluffy white rabbit fur around the collar. Her small palm-sized face was even more delicate, and her beautiful eyes were infinitely bright. In this way, the two of them looked even more like they were wearing the same clothes. Jiang Ruan felt it was a little strange that Xiao Xiao did not need anyone to serve him. On second thought, he often carried out various tasks, so he was not one of those young masters who opened their mouths to be served. Seeing that his collar was still open, she walked over to help him tie it. Her action was done very naturally, but Xiao Xiao was slightly startled. Jiang Ruan lowered her head, and the gentle fragrance of a young girl entered his nose. No matter what, he could not ignore it. Her fair fingertips clasped his collar, her movements gentle and demure. For no reason, Xiao Xiao's heart softened, and he suddenly had an impulse to kiss her forehead. Just as he had this thought, Lian Xiao's voice came from outside, "Miss, are you awake? This servant has brought hot water." Xiao Xiao's movements paused, and Jiang Ruan called out, "Come in." Lian Xiao and Bai Ji came in with a basin of water. When they saw Jiang Ruan and Xiao Xiao's actions, they were also stunned. Lian Xiao lowered her head and giggled. She thought that Xiao Xiao and Jiang Ruan looked like an ordinary couple. Originally, she was worried that when her miss met Xiao Xiao, who had a cold temperament, the two of them would be as respectful as ice. But when they came in, Xiao Xiao saw that her miss's expression was clearly very gentle. Bai Ji had a calm temperament, and when she looked at the bed, she saw that it was neat and tidy, and there was no red handkerchief on it. She immediately understood. She did not know whether to be nervous or relieved, and for a moment, her expression became somewhat complicated. But no matter how she thought about it, it was Jiang Ruan and Xiao Xiao's matter. When the two of them finished washing up, housekeeper Lin had already sent someone to bring breakfast over. It was just a simple plain porridge and side dishes, but everything was prepared exquisitely and exquisitely. As soon as housekeeper Lin entered the bridal chamber, he looked around randomly. When he saw the wedding attire on the screen, his face turned pale, and when he looked at the neat bedding, his face turned even paler. After a few times, he finally looked at Xiao Xiao and could not help but let out a long sigh, almost beating his chest and stamping his feet. Xiao Xiao did not even lift his eyes, as if he did not notice housekeeper Lin's actions. Jiang Ruan also would not take the initiative to pay attention to housekeeper Lin. This old urchin was old and disrespectful, and often said shocking things. Even she was often confronted by some of housekeeper Lin's words until she was speechless. Today, in this situation, housekeeper Lin was already on the verge of collapse. She only cared about eating and did not look at housekeeper Lin again. Feeling neglected, housekeeper Lin's self-esteem was deeply hurt, and he angrily flicked his sleeves and left. When he went out the door and saw the sun, he could not help but tear up. He wailed, "Master, Furin, this old servant has let you down, how was it?" Jean Eyre jumped down from the roof beam with a whoosh. Nothing intense and erotic happened. Like a fart. Housekeeper Lin was furious when he heard this and said, "Young master, young Furin's appearance could not be more innocent." The various intense scenes that he had expected did not appear. Then why had Xiao Xiao previously ordered that no one was allowed to eavesdrop outside the bridal chamber? No one was willing to see these two people sleep under a quilt, causing the servants to suffer a sleepless night for nothing. "Young master, you should be more careful." "I knew it." Jean Eyre was overjoyed and extended his hand towards his colleagues. "If you're willing to bet, you must be willing to lose. If you're willing to bet, you must be willing to lose. How much money did you bet yesterday?" Unexpectedly, they also used the matter of whether Xiao Xiao and Jiang Ruan would consummate their marriage as a wager. Seeing this, housekeeper Lin was unable to restrain his anger and immediately roared, "Gambling is not allowed in the Wang Fu." When he thought of Xiao Xiao and Jiang Ruan's matter, he could not help but be deeply worried. He was worried that if he could act like a gentleman in front of that kind of screen and a beauty like Jiang Ruan, could it be that his master had a problem in that area? Housekeeper Lin was frightened and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He secretly made up his mind to find Xia Qing and ask for a few prescriptions to try. After Jiang Ruan and Xiao Xiao had breakfast, the two of them were about to enter the palace to see Empress Dowager Ida. The horse carriage outside had long been prepared. Although housekeeper Lin was rather regretful that the two of them were unable to consummate their marriage, the arrangements for the first few days of their marriage were extremely thorough. The horse carriage was indeed housekeeper Lin's handiwork, and it was extremely extravagant. After Jiang Ruan sat in the carriage, she finally could not help but ask the question in her heart, "Is there a lot of money in the Wang Fu? Why is housekeeper Lin so generous?" In the previous account book, the account books of Jinying Wang Fu had all been checked by Jiang Ruan. Although they were also very wealthy, she was ignorant and did not have a whole number. She did not have any concept of the matter of money. Xiao Xiao was used to seeing Jiang Ruan's shrewd appearance, as if there was nothing in this world that she could not do. It was rare that there was something that she did not know how to do. He was surprised, but also felt that Jiang Ruan's current appearance was really somewhat cute. He smiled and said, "There is a lot of money," he said in a deadpan manner. Jiang Ruan was depressed. Originally, she had thought that the most wealthy would be none other than the imperial family. This housekeeper in Xiao Xiao Fu was so generous. Eunuch Li hinted that he would probably have to talk for a long time, so Jiang Ruan let Xiao Xiao go first. She left the palace and took a horse carriage back. She had lived in the palace for a period of time, so she did not even need the palace maids to order her around. She knew the way on her own. She took Lian Xiao and Bai Ji along the way out of the palace. Unexpectedly, when she reached the end of the imperial garden's long corridor, she saw from afar two beauties dressed in palace attire walking towards her. The two also saw her, and without waiting for Jiang Ruan to speak, one of them called out in surprise, "Dijia." That person was Jiang Dan. Today, she was dressed in an apricot-colored cotton brocade dress, embroidered with a white crane that was about to fly away. She wore ornaments that looked like they were worth a lot. It seemed that she was living well in the palace, and the fact that she had won the emperor's favor was not a lie. The woman beside Jiang Dan was dressed slightly worse than her. Her originally delicate expression had now become a smile that was no different from that of the women in the palace. It carried a bit of hypocrisy, and one could not see her heart and soul at a glance. It was Dong Yinger. Jiang Dan looked at Jiang Ruan and smiled. Her appearance was actually very warm. "Dijia, Dan Yang was not able to personally go out of the palace to add to your dowry last night. I am really ashamed. However, Dan Yang sent someone to give it to you. Does Dijia like it?" It was just a set of jewelry. Jiang Ruan took a look at it and then had the person throw it into the chest. She smiled slightly. I like Jiang Zhaoyi's gift very much, thank you. There is no need to be so polite. Jiang Dan took her hand. You and I are sisters of the same family, so naturally, we should support each other. You have become the Wang Fei of Jining Wang Fu, so naturally, I am also very happy. Jiang Ruan did not want to waste her breath on her, but Jiang Dan was so pestering, so she simply stood to the side and did not speak. Jiang Dan never did useless things. Today, it was definitely not just to reminisce about old times and curry favor with her. There must be some other purpose. Now, there was no harm in seeing what exactly she wanted to do. Sure enough, Jiang Dan saw her slightly impatient expression and suddenly smiled. Speaking of which, people's opportunities are really very different. At that time, when De Jijie returned from the rural residence, many people were waiting to see De Jijie make a fool of herself. De Jijie unexpectedly became the current Hong and Junzhu, Jining Wang Fei. That eldest brother had been away from home for many years, and there was no news of him at all. Suddenly, he became a great general with outstanding military achievements. On the other hand, second Jijie and mother have long since turned into white bones. Just like the 13th prince in this palace, he was originally just an unremarkable prince, but now, he has obtained the protection of His Majesty. How can a person's fate undergo such a huge change? It is really thought-provoking. If there is an afterlife, I do not know what kind of situation it will be. Hearing this, Jiang Ruan's eyes flashed, and she stared closely at Jiang Dan. She slowly opened her mouth. What did you say? I said, if there is an afterlife, what kind of situation it will it be a completely different fate, and what will be De Jijie's end? Jiang Dan's voice was sweet, but she had suppressed it, which made it sound somewhat strange. Seeing Jiang Ruan's expression suddenly change, Jiang Dan chuckled and casually said, Dan Yang still has matters to attend to, so I won't chat with De Jijie. Take care, De Jijie. After saying this, she turned around and left. Dong Yinger, who was at the side, lowered her eyes, and her gaze did not fall on Jiang Ruan for even a moment before she also left. On the horse carriage returning to the Fu, Jiang Ruan stared fixedly at the small table in front of her. Lian Xiao and Bai Ji stared at her nervously. Ever since Jiang Dan had spoken to Jiang Ruan appeared to be somewhat absent-minded. That grave expression made Lian Xiao and Bai Ji feel that it was somewhat different. Naturally, Jiang Ruan was bewildered. Jiang Dan's words had a profound meaning. In the ears of others, perhaps it was nothing, but in Jiang Ruan's ears, it was like a bolt from the blue. The secret of her rebirth had always been buried in the bottom of her heart. This was a secret that no one was allowed to touch. Now, hearing this from Jiang Dan's mouth, it was extremely shocking. Jiang Dan would not say such things for no reason. What had she discovered? Could it be that she had also been reborn? She was still lost in thought, and her brows were tightly knitted. In the eyes of Lian Xiao and Bai Ji, this was really too unusual. Jiang Ruan had never shown her emotions. Even if she had encountered a huge matter, at least on her face, there would always be no ripples. Now, however, she was only staring at the small table in front of her. Her gaze was not focused on it, as if she had sunk into a crazy state of contemplation. Even Lian Xiao could feel that she was somewhat afraid. This was really too strange. Why do I feel that Miss seems to be possessed? Lian Xiao whispered to Bai Ji, just now, what did fourth Miss say that made Miss so nervous? I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Bai Ji's expression was grave. I don't know why, but I keep having a feeling of unease. Jiang Ruan only felt that the more she seriously pondered over the key points, the more her mind became muddled. She could not even hear clearly what Bai Ji and Lian Xiao were saying in her ears. Jiang Dan's words were like a curse. As if she had gone crazy, all that reverberated in her mind were the news of Jiang Xing's death in her previous life. She had been pushed out of the main hall by Jiang Quan. She had fallen in a sorry state from the 9 steps of stairs. She had heard their cold and detached voices announcing that she was a demoness who brought calamity to the nation. She had seen Jiang Su's crazed expression. It was the moment when she had been made into a human swine. She had personally witnessed her struggles and cries. She had been beaten to death with a wooden stick, and she had made a vicious oath. The scenes had gone round and round, and every scene was stained with blood and tears. The fear of not having obtained and having already lost filled her. She could only feel that her heart was becoming more and more chaotic. A kind of unexplainable impatience surrounded her. Miss, what's wrong? Lian Xiao anxiously patted her back. Jiang Ruan's gaze was straight, and the expression in her eyes had already become crazed. With a pu sound, she suddenly felt something sweet in her throat. She spat out a mouthful of fresh blood, which sprayed all over the snow-white tablecloth of the small table in front of her. The blood stains were a ghastly sight. The next moment Lian Xiao screamed, "You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."